15th, 2020. We will call this meeting to order. We will ask folks who are willing and able to stand for the invocation and pledge of allegiance. It looks like the pastor who we had on the list to give the invocation is not logged on at this time, so we're going to actually ask Councilmember Johnson to give a brief invocation. So please stand if you're willing and able.
I'll have to sit because of the mic. If you bow your heads. Lord, be with us today as we make decisions and guide in this city. Lord, be with our staff, our community, and pray that you continue to work to keep us all safe, and be with us as we continue to try to work together and recover from all that is going on in 2020. As we pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll move into approval of the minutes for the regular meeting, which was held on December 8th. Has every member had a chance to review the minutes? And if so, is there any discussion? If there's no discussion on the said minutes, then I will make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. No discussion on said motion. Clerk will open a roll. Members cast the votes. For the members who are online, you could either voice your vote or you can give us a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yay.
Both members, Clendenin and member Bluebog, vote yes. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk.
Consent agenda items 1 through 11.
Has every member had a chance to review the consent agenda items 1 through 11? If so, is there any discussion on the consent agenda items? If there's no discussion on the consent agenda, then I will make a motion to accept the consent agenda and pass items 1 through 11.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. If there's no discussion on the motion, members will cast your vote.
Yay.
We have Councilmember Bluebog is being recorded as a yes. I believe Councilmember Clendenin, did you say yay?
Yes.
Is also recorded as a yes. Therefore, the item passes 7-0. Madam Clerk.
Report of Board of Bids and Contracts dated December 14th, 2020, and the Wichita Airport Authority Board of Bids and Contracts dated December 14th, 2020.
Excellent.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Hannah Lang, Department of Finance, here to present the December 14th Board of Bid recommendations.
Morning.
The first engineering bid we have is 2020 Sanitary Sewer Rehab Phase D, utility maintenance contractors for $374,117.37. Convert Emporia from Central to Dewey to two-way. Phillips Southern Electric for the base bid and add alternate 1 for an aggregate bid total of $307,650. Four-wheel drive 4.5 yard wheel loader, reject all bids. Sedans, SUVs, cargo vans, and pickup trucks. Recommendation is to award a Davis Moore Automotive, Don Hatton Chevrolet, Don Hatton Ford, and Rustiak Ford for the base bid with all the options. Truck pump hoist well pulling rig with 50-foot mast, Omaha Truck Center for $214,026. Concrete requirements, Kansas Ready Mix for Group 1 of $238,825. Andale Ready Mix Central Group 2, $33,800. Truck hydraulic digger derrick with 60-foot sheave height, Altech Industries for $326,979. Evergreen rec floor replacement, Continental Flooring Company with a base bid and add alternate 1 for an aggregate total of $143,408. Installation of water utility service lines deferred to December 21st Board of Bids. Polymer meter box lid deferred to December 21st. Dwight D. Eisenhower National Airport parking structure repairs deferred to December 21st. That is the Purchasing's Procurement website, and that's all of the Board of Bid recommendations. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions on the item? See no questions. If there is no discussion, then I will make the motion to take staff's recommended action to receive and file the report, approve the contracts, and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Second has been made by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open a roll. Members cast the vote. Members online will give us either an emperor's thumb or a yay. Jeff
Yes.
votes yes. Councilmember Councilmember Clendenin also vote yes, which means this passes unanimously, 7-0. Madam Clerk.
2019-2020 HUD Consolidated Plan Annual Performance and Evaluation Report.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of
Good
council.
morning.
Sally Stang, from Housing and Community Services Department for the record. The first item that I have for you today is the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, we lovingly call the CAPER, not to be confused with the CAFR out of finance. The city is required to prepare the CAPER report to report the accomplishments and progress towards our consolidated plan goals. The 2019-20 CAPER documents the activities we undertook from July 1st, 2019, ending June 30th, 2020, in the Community Development Block Grant Program, the CARES funding for Community Development Block Grant, the Home Investment Partnership Program, the Emergency Solutions Grant, and CARES Emergency Solutions Grants. So for Community Development Block Grant, we spent just over $2.8 million in home improvement programs. We assisted 111 households. Youth crime prevention and enrichment served over 3,300 youth and provided assistance to 771 domestic violence victims. For the home program, we expended just under $1.4 million in assisting 17 first-time home buyers with down payment assistance and the development of 16 homes under our Affordable Housing Development Program. Within the home program for infill housing development, we provided just over $926,000. And we worked with our development partners, Mennonite Housing, Wichita Habitat for Humanity, and Power CDC. And our development partners contributed just over $1.1 million in private sector construction financing and other funding towards the construction of those homes. Performance highlights for the Emergency Solutions Grant, our regular grant for the 2019 period, was just over $226,000. We provided overnight shelter to 2,156 individuals, day shelter services to 1,708, and rent and utility assistance for 175 persons facing eviction. Most of our numbers are a little bit under target because the fourth quarter of the program year, COVID hit, and many of our activities either shut down or reduced, so we're pretty close to our target numbers, but just a little bit below. CARES funding, we actually executed the CARES grant agreements on June 26th. So we had a very small window in which payments were made out under the CARES funding during this program year. So only $72.99 in CDBG CARES and just over $59,000 in ESG CARES funds. Citizen participation is the key in all of our programming planning documents. We were required to provide opportunities for citizens to comment on our CAPER report. The report was distributed for public review in the neighborhood resource centers, our office, City Hall, the Wichita website, along with specific branches of the Wichita Public Library. In addition, we published 2 public notices in the Wichita Eagle on November 30th and November 7th. advising that we were taking public comment through yesterday. We received no public comments, but we can receive any public comments at today's public hearing. So it is our recommendation to close the public hearing, approve the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, and authorize the submission to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I stand for any questions.
Excellent. Questions or comments? I know we have some members or some folks at Century 2 who are there to comment. I don't think on this item though. So we will then make a motion, or I'll make a motion to take staff's recommended action to close the public hearing, approve the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Reports, and authorize submission to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open a roll. Members cast the vote. Members
Yes.
on team. Councilmember Clendenin votes yes. Councilmember Bluebog, who has a very close-up on his glasses, blink twice if you're yes. That's 3 times, but we'll take it as twice. Also votes yes. So with that, we have a 7-0 vote, and the motion passes. Madam Clerk.
Dunbar Theater Facility Improvements.
And Ms.
Hello
Stang,
again,
you
I'm Sally
continue to have
Stang
the floor.
for the record. The second item that I have for you today is the Dunbar Theater Facility Improvements. The Dunbar Theater opened in 1941 and was the only place where African Americans could see film. It's located at 1007 North Cleveland Avenue in the McAdams neighborhood and is named for the African American poet and author Paul Laurence Dunbar. It closed in 1963 and has since sat empty. It's currently owned by Power CDC, who is one of our, as you saw in the last presentations, one of our close partners in the community. The location of the theater is on this map. You'll see it highlighted in blue, and just for visual reference, you see I-135 off to the east, and then 9th Street just south of the theater itself. On September 5th, 2017, the council approved the use of the sales proceeds from the Save-A-Lot grocery store at 9th and Grove, which was owned by Power CDC at the time. It permitted those funds to be used to create a special economic development project and recycle that funding through for the Dunbar Theater capital improvement, less a $15,906.83 interest due on the previous loan. It also approved a challenge grant in the amount of $250,000 for Phase 1 of the Dunbar Theater renovation project. The Phase 1 renovations include restoration of the interior and exterior spaces, the lobby expansion, accessibility improvements, construction of a support for the back of the house. It has an estimated cost of $5.2 million and had a completion deadline of January 1st, 2021, right around the corner. Phase 2 includes an addition to the north, including below ground level for meeting space and storage, and an additional $3.7 million. In Phase 3, additions to the south, including office space, educational area, and community meeting space. So the comprehensive plan was to convert what was once a movie house into a full performing arts center. Fundraising efforts have been below expectations, and obviously Phase 1 will not meet the completion deadline of January 1st. To date, we've spent $197,927 in CDBG funding, divided by soft costs and hard costs for the project. $145,930 for admin costs, project management, fundraising, outreach, legal services, and schematic design related to the theater and performing arts facility. An additional $51,997 was expended for mold remediation and concrete floor work, so physical work done on the structure. We were in a bit of a conundrum. Should Power CDC not complete a CDBG compliant project at the site, the city would be obligated to repay the $197,927 to HUD from non-federal funds. Getting ahead of this, about 6 months ago, we approached Power CDC about the possibility of adding a preliminary stage to the project to renovate the theater building itself into a community space to serve the residents of that neighborhood while they continue to fundraise to try and raise the money to complete the overhaul 3-phase Performing Arts Center. This option was discussed with HUD representatives who were supportive. They also didn't want to see this money repaid and would rather see public benefit, and provided us guidance in how we could change the project to the renovation of a public facility from a special economic development project. But HUD advised that in doing so, it would require reimbursement of the soft costs from non-federal funds, so those expenses that were already paid and would not be eligible expenses for a public facility renovation, and change the capital loan agreement to a subrecipient agreement and a forgivable loan for a public facility. So we would then need to be reimbursing CDBG $145,930 for those soft costs. Then they also told us, once reimbursed, those funds would be booked as program income to CDBG and then could be reallocated back to the project as CDBG funds for eligible expenses related to the public facility renovation. So it's moving from one pot to the other. The challenge grant that the project received is a source that can reimburse the CDBG dollars of $145,930, and the remainder of the challenge grant can be used for the operations expenses for the community center. So I provided a breakdown of the original capital loan agreement, less the withholding. So they had about $634,000 in CDBG originally allocated, and then $250,000 in the challenge grant. Here we're showing the breakdown of the soft costs and the hard costs, the reimbursement from the challenge grant back to CDBG, which would then leave them $581,994.17 remaining in CDBG to be expended on the rehab of the public facility, and just over $104,000 for the operations expenses for that public facility. On August 14th of this year, representatives from MABCD, MAPD, HCSD, and WFD all met on site with the owner and the architect to determine whether or not it was reasonable, what the scope would be in order to open the theater building as that small community meeting space with occupancy up to 49 people. The project architect determined there was adequate funding remaining in the CDBG funds to complete the required rehabilitation for the small meeting space. Also, the architect informed us that should the project raise the money necessary to start with full phase 1, they could stage it in a way that would not interrupt use of the facility as community space. When that phase 1, towards the end, the community space would be moved into the addition on the north side of the building without interruption, which was key to having this be successful. The change to the challenge grant does require an amendment to the ordinance from when that challenge grant was awarded, and all the funding agreements and amended ordinances have been approved as formed by the law department. It is recommended that the City Council place on first reading the amended ordinance revising the Dunbar Theater Challenge Grant, terminate the capital loan agreement and the existing challenge grant agreement, approve the budget transfer and the funding recommendations, approve the CDBG recipient agreement and the Dunbar Theater Facility Grant Agreement, and authorize the necessary signatures. I think that's a record for me. And I stand for any questions.
Very good. Well, we have some folks from the public who want to speak to this, so I'm going to open up to questions first, then to public comment, and then hopefully bring it back for discussion at the bench. So are there any questions for Director Stang at this time from the bench?
I think Councilmember Blubaugh has his hand raised.
Councilmember Blubaugh. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And Sally, I don't know if you can answer the question for me or not, but I thought that there was some Hyatt funding that was involved with the Dunbar. I don't know for sure on that. That's my first question. And then the second question would be, what is the closest other public facility for meetings in that area?
So the challenge grant that I referenced is the Hyatt funding that was awarded to this project. So they were awarded $250,000 from the Hyatt funds as a challenge grant. I don't know that I can answer what's the closest community center to that facility. I don't know if Councilmember Johnson knows that.
Yeah, the closest community center is McAdams Rec Center.
McAdams Rec Center.
And how far is that from the Dunbar?
Half mile.
Half a mile?
No other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Other questions on this item? If not, we will divert over to our friends at Century 2, to Miss Naomi, who I believe is setting up for public comment. The floor is yours.
There you go. So you just you'll see yourself in here.
Senator,
Good morning,
welcome.
Mayor Whipple, City Council members. I'm State Senator Oletha Faust-Goudreau. I represent the 29th District, City of Wichita. Downtown Wichita is in my district. If anybody knows me, they know that I am very, very supportive of the historical Dunbar Theater. I have worked on many projects in my district. I've worked with Councilman Brian Fry on the license plate tags with the City of Wichita flag on it. I've worked with City Councilman Brandon Johnson, and at the time, our new mayor, Brandon Whipple, was serving in the Kansas legislature, and I offered an amendment in the Commerce Committee to whereas we got the Star Bond funding for our Lawrence Dumont Stadium, the baseball stadium, Wind Surge, for that development. I want to say that I believe that supporting this agenda item for the Dunbar Theater, it will serve as a hub for education, economic development, entertainment, and City Councilman Member Blubaugh, your question in that area where the Dunbar Theater sits in one of the oldest communities in the city of Wichita, we have Jackson Mortuary there. We have Lee Overture Elementary School there. We have a host of churches in that area. We have a host of little small pockets of businesses that will connect to the Dunbar Theater there. So, and it's easy, accessible to I-35 off of 9th Street near the KU Med Center. I believe that if we build up one community, we build up the city, we build up the entire state. With COVID-19, we need ways to spur the growth of job creations. That's what will happen at the Dunbar Theater. It will be a hub to help keep our youth here in the city of Wichita where they can go and showcase their talents. This has been as all of you know that serve on the city council, I've worked along with Councilwoman Becky Tuttle and with Cindy Claycomb on various issues, and I'm just saying I look forward to working with each of you to continue growing the area where the Dunbar Theater will be. And I just want you to know it's actually about maybe a mile and a half from Old Town. So it will connect us and it will help this city grow and it will give that community pride in that area. And so I urge you to please support this project, and I look forward to working with each of you in the upcoming legislative session. Is that my time, or if I have more, I can go. And each of you, I'm just so, thank you so much for what you're doing for all the Wichitans. And it's so much more I could say, but thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate the comments. Next speaker, please. Welcome, sir.
All right, good morning, Mayor and council members. My name is Daryl Kelly, and I serve as a member of the Historic Dunbar Theater Advisory Board. I've had the privilege to stand before this body many times to advocate for projects like the Riverfront Legacy Master Plan and Navsker Park. However, I'm most passionate about revitalizing this historic theater and transforming the surrounding campus into a beautiful, multicultural performing arts and learning center. There are 3 points that I would like to leave you with today. Point number 1, the arts are vital for our youth to be creative and to have outlets to showcase talents and learn new things. Studies have been done. Using the art side of your brain helps balance you out and aids in the learning process with the more analytical side of your brain. That's why STEM is now STEAM. This project will help our city and region achieve this. Point number 2, we know that the area surrounding the theater is economically depressed and needs attention. A project of this scale will be a catalyst to spark investment in this area like never before. The Dunbar McAdams neighborhoods were once thriving epicenters of commerce. We believe this project shows a commitment to citizens and will be the first domino to fall to return this part of our city back to a thriving community. Point 3, right now our nation faces racial injustice and inequality, social and political unrest, a global pandemic, and economic uncertainty and anxiety. Wichita, we have the opportunity right now. This project can't be done in a vacuum. We have the chance to come together. We can take the lead. We can be on the big stage to show this country, no, scratch that, to show the world what true community looks like. So I ask everyone under the sound of my voice, let's work together to get this project done. Here are a couple of proposed action steps. If you can, organizations, foundations, and individuals, put your money where your mouth is. If you have talents or resources, please lend them. Please go to the website, learn more about the Dunbar Project, and share on all of your social media platforms. And if you are not able to do any of these, we need your prayer and support. In conclusion, this work is hard. We are all volunteers. We are dealing with a historic building, and as soon as we begin to get traction with our fundraising from places like Walmart, AT&T, Speedy Cash, Credit Union of America, BKD, and more, we were hit with a global pandemic, which tempered some of our efforts. But we are still resilient and steadfast on the course to see this vital project through. So I ask the City Council to pass the recommendation as laid out by Director Stain to continue this critical work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please. Honorable,
Great, thank you.
welcome.
Good morning, council members and mayor. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. I am Lavonta Williams, and I definitely am in support of this project. This project has been something that I have been investing myself, my time, any funds for the last 10 years, as long as we have been trying to make this work. Councilmember Blueball, you asked about what center is close by. As was told, McAdams is the closest center. But I'm not talking about a center. I'm talking about historic Dunbar Theater. I'm talking about a place where our young kids can get a boost to performing arts. And they need this place that they can have and call a performing arts center or a historic theater, because we want them to understand the difference between a center and a place that is specifically working on performing arts. As was told before, performing arts helps to increase the academics of our young people. I come to you thinking from that young people perspective, because I taught 35 years, I started to say millions of years, 35 years with middle school students, and they are our most vulnerable. So if we can encourage our middle school youth and below and above to get involved in performing arts, I am ready to save the academics of our young people. And right now we are in a crisis. So if we can be able to open and allow them to go in and do their performing arts, we will. We just had a presentation by a young lady named Enjoy, who participated on The Voice. And she took high school students and middle school students and put on a performance, and they did very well. That's what our young people are looking for. As a performing arts center and as a theater, because as a theater, our young people receive the critical and the creative skills that are needed for lifelong learning. And I am a believer in things that are going to create lifelong learning. Also, if you think about it, some of us grew up with a place called Joyland. We grew up with a place called Kittyland. We grew up with many other places for our young people to go. I am one of those people who remember the Dunbar Theater. I remember going there every Saturday afternoon to spend time there with my probably 25 cents extra to buy candy. So I have memories of Joyland, of Kittyland, and I have memories of the Dunbar Theater. And that's what I want to help create for the young people in the community. I want to help create some memories. Right now, there's not a lot for them to have memories of, but they need this memory. The McAdams area is a very historic area, because once the African American community moved from the downtown area, the McAdams area is where they moved to, because the city wanted a business center, a business district downtown. So they all congregated in that particular area, making sure that the village was there to raise the children. We've got to get back to the village. We've got to get back to thinking of ways to save our young people. There's violence, and we can make sure that we are helping to alleviate that. So I ask you to think about the support that we need to go in and finish this project. Think about when I did leave the bench a few years ago, that was one of the areas that I asked, please continue to move this forward. With the challenge grant, which was the Hyatt funding, yes, I asked, please move this forward. With CDBG money that was about to be withdrawn from that grocery store, I asked, please continue to move this forward. I sit on the advisory board for the historic Dunbar Theater and was chair, and especially right now during this vulnerable time. My mom and my husband need me, but I still sit on that board. Do you think I would get up in the middle of this cold weather for nothing? You know I don't like cold. So I stand before you today asking you to support a project that I guarantee you is going to help our community have memories in the end, and you will be a part of that memory. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I stand for questions.
I don't think there are any, but thank you so much. Next speaker, please.
We don't have any further speakers.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you. We will bring discussion back to the bench. Is there further discussion on this item? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you. Sally, you may know the answers to these questions. Since this has been going on for 3 years, how much money has been raised in relation to that challenge grant, and what happens to that money with this scenario?
So in this scenario, we're asking the challenge grant agreement as it was written to be terminated and enter into the new facilities grant. We'll be using just over $145,000 of that to reimburse the CDBGs for the soft costs that are ineligible. Those will be then redirected back at the project, so it's not that any funding is lost. My last report was that they'd raised $50,500
So
towards their
so what happens to that $50,000? Is it not used for this construction and renovation cost?
It is not in this community center space. That money was raised specifically for the theater renovations.
Okay.
And for those donors, that's staying in the pot for the Phase 1 theater renovations that we hope comes soon once the fundraising kicks back in.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions?
Councilmember Blubaugh has his hand raised.
Councilmember Bluebog.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and I appreciate Councilmember Levanta Williams answering my questions, because I do remember the Dunbar. We had a lot of discussions about it in the past. There were a lot of concerns because we knew that it was going to be a steep climb to go ahead and get the donations we needed to complete the Dunbar. I like the change of the vision of it, because I think overall the main priority was to preserve the building. There's a lot of history there, and they wanted to ensure that, you know, the community could still utilize it. And as I recall, with the Hyatt funding, each council member had a discretionary amount to spend in their district, and that's why I wanted the clarification that was part of the discretionary funding that Council Member Williams had allocated to that, and I will be in support of this today. Thank you.
All right, further discussion from the bench? If none, then the chair will recognize Councilmember Johnson of District 1.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I make my motion, just to give some more information, the Dunbar Theater project has made quite a bit of progress. I know it's been a little quiet and, as was mentioned, maybe a little slow, but the floor has been poured, so that building has been open. Folks have been able to tour. As Sally said, they've raised $55,000. I did not ask Senator Faust-Godot or Ryan for permission for the rest, but there's another donation coming, a significant one. So they are continuing to raise money, and this next phase allows them to raise more. So one of the goals was to have a space activated, not only to serve the community, but also to show we're making progress and that this is a project worth investing in. And so they are making those steps. This action today allows them to make another significant step towards that and really start doing some programming in the area. Another piece is, as we talk about the neighborhood and being a little economically depressed, that's been one focus of mine, is making sure we get that entire community uplifted. And there are some local investors looking heavily at building homes in the area. Some have already started, others are looking at acquiring property now to do so. And what they all have mentioned was potentially being located next to a fully functional theater. And that's something that excites them. So for me, this is just another step forward in making this dream of so many come true. And I think our investments in the Park up north and McAdams will also help, again, continue to uplift the area and make it even more attractive. So with those, and kind of letting the cat out of the bag with Senator Faust-Godot, I would move that we place on first reading the amended ordinance revising the Dunbar Theater Challenge Grant, terminate the capital loan agreement and the existing challenge grant agreement, approve the budget transfer and funding recommendations, and approve the CDBG subrecipient agreement and the Dunbar Theater Facility Grant Agreement, and authorize the necessary signatures.
And I would second and just speak to the motion briefly, that I had the opportunity to accompany Councilmember Johnson as well as Senator Faust-Godot earlier this year to take a tour of the Dunbar Theater, and it is a really cool place. It's a historical building. It's inspiring to walk through it and then hear the stories from the community about all the programs that used to happen there. And this, taking a step forward of bringing back to use, really to life to a lot of folks, this building, so that more memories and more of those experiences can be generated is great for not just District 1, but for our entire Wichita community. So with that, we'll go ahead and open the roll. Members can cast their vote. Councilmember Bluebog and Councilmember Clendenin both vote yes. With a motion of 7-0, the motion does, with a vote of 7-0, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Final ESG CARES Act funding allocations.
All right, Ms. Stang, this is your third time up?
Third time, last time, last time today. Thank you very much again, Sally.
You always bring us good news, so feel free to just do the rest of the agenda if you want.
Thank you. As promised last week, we are back this week with the final ESG CARES Act funding allocation requests. We receive an annual allocation of emergency solutions grants from HUD. These funds are used to support engagement of homeless individuals and families living on the streets, improvement and operation of homeless shelters, and rapidly rehouse homeless and provide assistance to individuals and families to prevent them becoming homeless. So our little award that we received, our normal award, was just over $246,000. As a result of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act, the city received additional allocation. We have until 2022 to expend the funds, but we had a requirement that we must obligate the funds within 6 months of executing the grant agreement, which occurred on June 25th and just coincides that Christmas Day is our obligation deadline. We received just over $3.3 million. So this was a huge undertaking, and I commend the staff for being able to program, more than 10 times our annual allocation, working hand in hand with the agencies in the community to make sure these funds get out to help those who are most vulnerable in our community. The following allocation recommendations are made available on the city's website for public comment for 5 days, which, as we've talked about before, is what HUD requires in order to streamline getting these funds out to the community, is only 5 days on the website for public comment. We received no additional comments to these allocations. We are recommending an additional $400,000 be allocated to our partners who provide homeless prevention funding to avoid eviction. That's Center of Hope, an additional $100,000 to serve 50 households, and the Salvation Army, $300,000. Now, those numbers came about after conversations with them, and that is the max that they feel that those organizations can use through 2022. The ESG funds do require that an eviction be pending. So these funds have not yet been activated, even the previous allocations, but we're expecting a wave of requests once the eviction moratorium is lifted. We're also recommending an additional allocation of $30,000 to WPD's Homeless Outreach Team's Finding Your Way Home program. This program, it is administered by the HOT team, and it provides funding for bus passes and transportation for identified homeless individuals in order for them to be reunited with family members out of town. So the 30 days within the homeless management information system ensures they're truly homeless and using homeless services. It is one of the best results we can get coming out of the homeless management services, is to be able to reunite people with their families who are willing to provide not only housing, but connect them back to support services and other needs. So this is a tremendous opportunity to be able to try and connect more of the homeless in our community with their family members. The last allocation we are requesting is $800,000 for the Wichita Family Crisis Center for them to acquire and rehabilitate a new facility. We have been providing funding for emergency hotel vouchers because there has been so much demand for services and they've outgrown their existing facility. This is being brought forward a little different than we have in the past as a contingent award, which allows us by regulation to obligate the funds, but we still have work to do with Wichita Family Crisis Center for them to identify the property, secure remaining funding, make sure that it passes environmental review. So today's action just allows us to obligate those funds. If that project does not come to pass, we can actually reallocate them to something else. But this allows us to have an investment in another asset in our community that's going to serve long-term should this project come together, and still meet our obligation deadline of December 25th. We decided, since this was the last time we were coming back with ESG CARES funding. I decided to give you just an overview of everything, the full $3.3 million and where that has been allocated across multiple allocations. And you can see, of course, we have admin and indirect costs, but early on, it was the emergency shelter with humankind, the hotel motel vouchers, which are actually going crazy right now with utilization, the homeless caseworkers, the landlord incentive program, homeless outreach and internship program, rapid rehousing, homeless prevention. We've done some really creative things with this source of funding that we don't normally get, that is going to tell us a lot going forward and which of these efforts have the most impact for our community. But that fully obligates the $3.3 million. The ESG funding this CARES ESG funding is exempt from match requirements, and therefore there's no impact to the general fund. This last allocation request will have us fully committed by that December 25th deadline. The Law Department will review and approve all funding agreements and a contingent award letter for the Wichita Family Crisis Center as to form. And we're recommending the City Council approve the CARES Act ESG funding allocations, authorize the funding agreements, the contingent award letter, and the necessary signatures, and I stand for any questions.
All right, so we'll start with questions. I believe we have a statement from the public as well, and then so we'll bring it back after that to the bench for discussion. So any questions on this item? Councilmember Fry.
Sorry?
Director saying you're too quick.
Sorry, so when the Wichita Family Crisis Center moves this forward, will it come back to the bench for us to review?
Absolutely. The funding agreement will come back for approval.
Okay, do we have an expected timeline? Do we
Well,
know?
we're on such a short expenditure deadline. We have to expend by 2022. So if we don't have something moving forward in the next 6 months, we're going to have to look at trying to reallocate those funds to another project.
Okay, that was my follow-up question. If that doesn't happen, what do we do?
Yes, and give us enough time to identify and expend
And
that
not lose the
800.
money?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe the director of the Wichita Crisis Center is on hand to speak to this as well. So some of the questions that are more directed at the organization, there's an opportunity to get the answers to. Other questions of staff? If there are none, then the chair will recognize Amanda. Welcome, and we're glad you're here, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me today. I'm going to look at my watch because I tend to speak very quickly because I'm obviously very emotional about this issue. Also, I can't see any of your faces, so I'm just going to talk to my people here at Century 2 as if I were talking to the City Council right now. So I would love to get to Councilmember Fry's question, which I think is extremely valid. But first, I want to just talk about the domestic violence situation in Wichita. As most of you know, because I talk about this a lot, there is a domestic violence crisis in Wichita, and there is a lack of safe shelter space. There are only 2 domestic violence shelters and a total of about 60 safe beds, which is woefully inadequate. Even before the pandemic, we lacked capacity. We work very closely with the other shelter, and between the 2 of us, we lack capacity for about 40 to 50 victims every single month. We never turn anyone away, but we had been putting people in hotels to the tune of an increase of about 700% each year. Then the pandemic hit. And that has put into stark relief the need for additional shelter space in this city. And that is safe, confidential space for domestic violence victims, which is very different, obviously, than homeless shelter space. So as a result of the pandemic, our facility, the Wichita Family Crisis Center, is antiquated. It's about 40 years old. It's a repurposed doctor's office, so we have only 2 bathrooms for 25 to 27 victims, which means we've had to decrease capacity during COVID to keep people safe by about 2/3. We've also had to decrease our advocates on site because our space is limited for them as well. That has caused us to use hotels even more, which really impacts our ability to help victims. It keeps them safe and alive, but also part of our mission is helping them to become independent, productive citizens, and we need to work one-on-one with them in order to help them do that. So this shelter project is woefully very, very much needed, as you can see from our numbers, and back to Councilman Fry's question, and I think probably the question that a lot of you have on your minds. Because of COVID and what we had been seeing over the past 8 months, we recognized the urgent need to move forward with a capital campaign we had been working on for years. So I'm going to read this part. We have identified a viable property that will allow the crisis center to increase capacity by 2/3, which is wonderful because even before COVID, we had children sleeping on the floor and people sleeping in our TB room. A sister nonprofit which successfully completed the acquisition and renovation of a similar property in a city in Kansas has served as a guide for us in this effort. So we've had architectural and construction professionals review the facility. Zoning and parking have been reviewed. Ongoing utility and operation analysis have been completed. We've had multiple conversations with the owner. Negotiations are underway. The Crisis Center has identified and secured relationships with the necessary funders to complete the funding for this project, as well as ensuring that we have funding to go forward and sustain this new shelter, which obviously is incredibly important to the mission. And we believe that the modest renovations this property require will clearly be completed by the summer of 2022. And in conclusion, I just want to say, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Wichita Family Crisis Center, we're formerly the YWCA. We've been a part of the Wichita community since 1907, and we opened the first domestic violence shelter in Wichita in 1976. So we are well established, and we aren't going anywhere. In fact, we are just here to serve this community. And I'll close by saying, as a reminder, domestic violence is an issue that affects every one of us, every socioeconomic level, every race, every ethnicity, and keeping women and children and domestic violence victims alive, safe, and helping them to have productive, independent lives will serve this community at large. This is not an independent and isolated issue. So I guess I'll stand for questions.
Are there questions of the director? See none. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Is there further public comment? I'm guessing not.
No, sir.
Bring discussion back to the bench. Further discussion. So I will make a motion to accept staff's recommended action to approve the CARES Act ESG funding allocations and authorize the funding agreements, the contingent award letter, and the necessary signatures. And I'll just speak very briefly to the center, and I know that this motion or this item is more than just allocating funds to the Wichita Crisis Center, but last summer, or the summer before in 2019, I was able to tour the Wichita Crisis Center, and it really is in need of a new facility. These, the rooms that they utilize were actually doctor's offices, old doctor's offices, and I remember bumping into a person in the hallway during the tour who had I'm guessing a 2 or 3 year old, and how just imagining how small that room is, and folks who are really escaping domestic violence situations, going into an environment where there could be up to 25 to 30 clients being served in only 2 bathrooms. And again, there are children with these clients as well, and I just think that we can do better here in Wichita, and I'm glad that we are allocating, or hopefully if this passes, we will be able to do our part in the council to help allocate these funds to help this organization better serve our community. So with that, I will be looking for a second.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. We'll look towards our colleagues on teams who have the affirmative yes vote. With a result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass unanimously. Madam Clerk.
2021 contract renewal with Visit Wichita.
Welcome, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of Wichita City Council. Dante Martin, Assistant City Manager. I'm here to present the 2021 contract renewal with Visit Wichita. Visit Wichita promotes tourism and convention activities throughout the region. Tourism impacts the local economy by bringing new dollars into the area, generating tax revenue, and creating jobs. According to a study conducted by Visit Wichita, the economic impact of tourism to the Wichita area exceeds $1.2 billion, and domestic travel expenditures generate nearly 12,000 jobs in Sedgwick County. Visit Wichita is led by President and CEO Susie Santo. In 2020, there were a number of events scheduled to be hosted in Wichita. The pandemic required Visit Wichita and the city and the region to pivot. We were able to host the U.S. Figure Skating Synchronized Skating Championships in January. Beginning in March, things got turned upside down. Significant conventions and sporting events canceled or rescheduled. As a result, hotel revenue is expected to be down 53% in 2020 from 2019. Visit Wichita during the year directed its efforts at supporting travel partners and helping the local community and residents access partner products and services. It also helped connect local hotels to meetings and sports planners throughout the country in anticipation of 2021. This slide lists a number of events that were originally scheduled for 2020 but have been rescheduled to 2021. And despite this number of rescheduled events, 2021 hotel revenue is expected to be decreased 32.5% from 2019, primarily due to the timing of the economic recovery, the recovery from the pandemic. Visit Wichita's performance is evaluated based on two primary performance indicators. Economic impact, which is measured by future group bookings of new business, repeated or service business, and leisure visitors, as well as financial stewardship as measured by the return on total operating costs, T-bid incremental room nights, and leisure marketing. 2019 is the last full year of data that we have available to us. In 2019, there were $13.5 million in future group bookings, $38.8 million in bookings of repeated service bookings, and $72 million in leisure visitor.
Mr. Assistant Manager, I just received a text message that the audio is out on television broadcast, and I want to make sure that, sake of transparency, everyone can hear us. Tyler, is there anything on your end? I got a thumbs up. Are we back on? All right, very good. I think we're two thumbs up, so please continue.
So where this slide shows full year totals for 2019, Visit Wichita was able to provide estimates for 2020. In light of the pandemic, Visit Wichita estimates future group bookings to be down to 2.5 million in 2020. Future group bookings repeated in service to be down to 3.2 million in 2020. At this time, we don't have estimates for leisure visitors in 2020. I'm going to say that correctly before the end of this presentation. The other performance measure for Visit Wichita is financial stewardship. Last full year data is from 2019. It shows a return on total operating costs 22.17 to 1, a return on incremental room nights 7.9 to 1, and leisure marketing 64 to 1. We don't have estimates at this time for total operating costs and return on TV at leisure marketing. However, the 2020 estimate for return on incremental room nights is 1.67 to 1. I believe Ms. Santo is with us at Century 2, and she may be able to provide more details for you, Mayor and Council. As for the financial considerations of the contract, in 2020, the adopted budget for Visit Wichita was roughly $2.5 million. The 2020 revised budget was reduced to $1.6 million. The contract that I'm presenting to you today has a 2021 budget of $2 million. In addition to that, there is a fundraising match for each dollar that Visit Wichita raises over $200,000. That match is capped at $100,000, and also a convention promotion contingency fund reimbursement up to $150,000. That being said, staff recommends that the City Council approve the Visit Wichita 2021 contract. I'm here for questions, as well as Susie Santo, who I believe is at Century 2.
Excellent. Questions of staff? There's no questions of staff. We will check in at Century 2. I believe we have at least two speakers who would like to speak to this. So Naomi, take it away.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. It's great to be here with you via Zoom. I just wanted to just take a minute and thank Dante for his partnership. I tell you, you are very blessed to have him in the role that he has been in. He's been an incredible partner with us over the last 10 months as we've been navigating uncharted territory. So personally want to thank Dante and let all of the electeds know what a great partner he has been. You know, it's been a heck of a year, a tough year. From an industry perspective, when we look across the nation, we're down about 500 billion, or we're approaching about 500 billion in economic activity. I tell you, it's we were sitting here on March 12th with hosting wheelchair basketball in town from all over the country. Friday the 13th is a day we'll always remember. That's when everything started shutting down, and from there we know what's happened the last 10 months. You know, like most organizations, we pivoted, and it was all about trying to drive visitors into our retail establishments and our hotels, you know, getting locals to feel comfortable being back out again, and anything we could do to support our industry, and doing a lot of advocating for the additional CARES Act, et cetera, as we know that stimulus is the lifeline to many of our organizations. The industry is hit hard, no doubt. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is pent-up demand. There is a desire to travel. We've continued to see that through our travel sentiments. And with most recently the exciting news with the vaccine, and I understand just yesterday it was here in Sedgwick County, that is really what we needed for this industry as we begin to look forward into recovery into 2021. I've had a lot of questions about the timing. Our leisure visitors will come back first. I know many of you on the council love to travel as I do, and I know you're anchoring to take a trip, and we have got to position Wichita to capitalize on that movement when people start moving again around the country. And that is why these dollars are so important to get us back out there to aid in the recovery. Again, I talked about leisure being out there with a strong brand message so we can capitalize on the drive market to come to Wichita and spend their dollars and to help our travel and tourism right here in Wichita. We want to capture the share, and that is what these dollars this year will do, and to position us. So when you think about looking forward to 2021, it's about capitalizing on that leisure visitor, but it's also positioning us for the future, because as a reminder, our future group business, we're booking for the next year and the year after that. And so our activities now have an impact to set us up for success in the future. Finally, I can't imagine the amount of stress that all of you have been under over the last 10 months. Have you been having to think about issues and actions that you could have never imagined? I just want to say thank you for doing everything you can to keep our industry open, to keep our doors open of our businesses, keeping us safe. We greatly appreciate that. All of our research indicates that the actions that you've taken, from a visitor perspective, they were looking for that as they were choosing a destination. We look forward to turning the corner on the pandemic and seeing more visitors back into Wichita in the future. So thank you all very, very much for all of your efforts. And I'm here for questions if you have any.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Welcome.
Welcome, good morning. Celeste Rossette with Save Century 2, 3330 West Douglas. The problem with the Visit Wichita 2020 budget allocation is ethics, plain and simple. The second problem is it causes neglect of historic Century 2 Performing Arts Center. You are taking money away from the care of Century 2 and giving it to a pork agency, Visit Wichita. Dante Martin failed to mention that Visit Wichita gets, in addition to what they're asking for today, all of the tourism bid, that's TBID. On top of that, what they're asking for today is to dip into the fund for Century 2 by taking part of the transient guest tax, the hotel tax. What is being proposed here today for their 2020 budget allocation is almost $2 million. This is roughly 56% of what they received for 2019, yet as you saw, their performance for 2020 was terrible. This is an abnormal year. COVID has definitely hit us with tourism and convention. But this isn't going to change. Convention is not going to come back as we have had in the past. Businesses have learned that they can send their employees to online Zoom meetings such as this one here today to meet and greet and even do training centers with offices across the United States and across the world. Business and leisure travel is not going to rebound for 5 or 6 more years, and some conventions just aren't coming back. Be realistic, cut their contract and use the money where it needs to be. Use the funds to take care of Century 2, a modernist historic building on the National Federal Historic Registry. And as pointed out, the objections of their criteria contract have not been met. Future group bookings are bust, future group bookings repeated or almost non-existent, and the leisure visitors, we couldn't even come up with an estimate, though it had been projected at $90 million. We don't know where it will be. Second, Visit Wichita was not a good steward of our taxpayer funds. I spoke before City Council last year and asked Visit Wichita why they were paying rent on offices in Waterwalk. They are still paying over $200,000 in rent. Visit Wichita should move into a city-owned building such as the former public library, also on the National Registry, or into Century 2 and save $200,000 in rent. Are they wasting other taxpayer funds? Are their salaries too high? Why aren't you contracting this out to other third parties for competition? City Manager Robert Layton told me he purposely did not take care of Century 2, and he had decided on his own to let the building run down. That's not right. Over 17,000 citizens signed our petitions saying they wanted a vote on Century 2. But now let's get to the really corrupt part of Visit Wichita. There's a conflict of interest. Jim Korek, a millionaire developer, is chairman of the board for Visit Wichita. He has given you all, at least the majority of you, because I reviewed political campaigns, money to run for city council positions. So he sits on, as chairman of the board, Visit Wichita, and oversees the relationship between the city and Visit Wichita and the amount of payments that are given for their budget, which has been so generous that in the last audited financial reports, they had over $2 million in cash balances and $1 million in investment securities. You all certainly like to give money to Visit Wichita, where Jim Korek sits on the board. Even more interesting is Jim Korek has tapped into the hotel guest tax for his own private Fairfield Inn in Waterwalk. Beginning in 2014 and for 20 years after, the hotel guest tax money is being diverted to pay off $4 million to help Jim Korek, a private millionaire developer. Not a bad gift of taxpayer money. The first year this debt was recorded in the city books, it was falsely labeled stormwater utilities, but these bonds have nothing to do with stormwater utilities. They're simply paying him back for the cost of building his own private hotel. And in 2034, we're going to have to make a $2 million balloon payment on this debt. How are we going to meet that obligation in 2034? Refinance the debt for another 20 years? These things should not be tied together. He also is appointed to the Riverfront Legacy Coalition, which interestingly enough came up with a recommendation to destroy the historic Century 2. So let's review. He gave some of you campaign contributions. He's the chairman of the board for Visit Wichita. They've built up cash and investment balances in their balance sheet. And he also sits on the Riverfront Legacy Coalition, which recommended destroying historic Century 2 performing arts. It just doesn't make ethical sense. And it's another reason why this city council, Mayor Brandon Whipple, you need an ethics policy. The details for all of this documentation can be seen in a Zoom meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. and Thursday at 6 p.m. You can email me at mcr112@yahoo.com to get the instructions for attending the Zoom meeting. I'll show you the corruption involved with this agency, Visit Wichita, and the ties with Jim Korek, their board of directors. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I know we will be taking up the issue of ethics in very close to future meetings that are not too distant from ours. But as far as the concern about deferred maintenance, keeping up Century 2, I believe we allocated earlier this year about, I would say, $250,000 towards that. And I wanted to just have an opportunity for staff to address the progress on that. The money that we have allocated to put towards maintaining Century 2, that is still ongoing.
Mayor, that's correct. We have an annual allocation for maintenance and repairs at Century 2.
And it's still, for the next 10 years, at the level in which we allocated earlier this year, or were they changed with the pandemic?
I believe it's over an extended period of time. I can't remember if it's every year for the 10 years.
Okay, excellent. Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I was just going to add, it was either $2 million or $2.5 million that we approved over a 10-year period for Century 2.
Very good. Any concerns about ethics? Again, we are working towards our ethics policy, and we'll be having that meeting hopefully within the first month of next year. Other discussion, Councilmember Fry.
Thank you. I would just like to thank the Visit Wichita staff. This year has been extremely challenging with the COVID restrictions on travel. It has decimated our hospitality industry across the city, restaurants, retail, attractions, hotels. Visit Wichita staff was not immune. They made several cuts as well as they have pivoted and adjusted to try to address it. I think the focus that they had with supporting our local stores and restaurants and attractions while we weathered this storm was on point. Going forward, yes, we don't know how quickly any of this is going to come back, but Wichita is uniquely suited in that we can be a drive-to destination. Air travel is going to take a little bit longer to come back, but I think the focus on being that drive-to destination, being where we're at, is again on target, and having the funds necessary to do those marketing expenditures and continue to program for our local businesses as they try to bounce back is what's needed. And as a board member of Visit Wichita, I take Mr. Sett's questions and concerns very seriously, and we will continue to work with staff to answer some of those questions. But this is the right move for Visit Wichita at this time.
Other comments or questions? All right, so see none. With that, I'll make a motion to take staff's recommended action to approve the contract between the City of Wichita and the Wichita Convention and Tourism Bureau, which is doing business as Visit Wichita. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Clerk, open the roll. James Clendenin's thumb is up high. Then Councilmember Jeff Lubach stuck his thumb up even higher, but both are yes. With a result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Funding for multimodal facility.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council members, Paul Gunzelman with Public Works Engineering. This morning, the item before you is funding for the Multimodal Center. In November 2019, the City of Wichita received a Federal Transit Authority FTA grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation to improve transportation services through a multimodal transportation center. Throughout the year, staff has been working with the FTA to complete the required facility planning basis information sheet and the environmental review process following guidelines set forth by the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, otherwise known as NEPA. In addition, a noise study has been completed and determined that the facility will not have an impact on the adjacent area. In October, the FTA acknowledged completion of the facility planning information sheet, and the City of Wichita received the approved NEPA study completed for the area bounded by Sycamore, Oak, Burton, and Texas. Staff is now beginning to work with the FTA operations and program management team, who will provide the necessary information to assist with grant administration, design, and construction of the multimodal center. The slide before you shows you conceptually how the facility could fit on the site, bounded by those adjacent streets. The facility will contain transit amenities to handle connections from the commuter service and connect to downtown circulator, as well as transfer points to routes meeting education, employment, and economic development that is key to the growth of the West Bank area of the Arkansas River. The center will also include approximately 500 parking spaces, space for the Wichita's bike share program, and charging areas for a portion of the Wichita's transit electric bus fleet. A request for qualifications has been drafted for publication to hire a qualified team to design the center, and will be published once the FTA provides the authority to do so. A draft of that is in their hands at this time. Once we get design further along, the project will be returned to the City Council for consideration of the design concept. Funding for this project was originally included in the adopted 2019 through 2028 Capital Improvement Program. That CIP included $15 million in grant funding and $5 million of general obligation bond funding for 2019. Funding has not yet been initiated and has been carried forward to the 2021 through 2030 adopted Capital Improvement Program. The actual FTA bus and bus facility competitive federal funds total $14,232,816. Combined with the budgeted $5 million in general obligation bond funding for the multimodal facility, staff recommends initiating $19,232,816 for design, infrastructure, and utility work, construction of the center, and oversight of the project. It is recommended to approve the budget, adopt the resolution, and authorize the necessary signatures. And that will stand for questions.
Questions on the item? Councilmember Frye.
Thank you. Paul, does this budget include the demo costs? And what is the construction method that we will use for the design construction?
This budget does not include the demo costs, and the method that we are at right now is a design, bid, build.
Okay. Do we have an estimate?
Sorry. I was going to say, working with the FTA on our initial conversations, it's they're estimating approximately a year for design as they go through project review.
Do we have an estimate on what the demolition cost is going to be and a timeline for when that can happen?
Councilmember Frye, the council's approved that item.
That was in our consent, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. But it didn't address the timeline. Did it?
I don't recall that it did.
So what's our
Work
timeline
is
for the
to
demo?
Begin immediately.
Yeah, I think, we'll start that immediately.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, sorry. Too big of an agenda packet this week.
Okay, that's okay.
I got lost in some of the detail.
That's okay.
All right, other comments or questions of staff? Doesn't seem to be any public comment on this, so if there's no further comments, I will give the floor to Councilmember Bluebog as this falls in District 4.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and I'd like to make the motion to approve the budget, adopt the resolution, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. Our colleagues on teams, Councilmember Clendenin and Councilmember Bluebog, have both voted yes, which results in 7 yeas to 0 nays. The motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Funding and supplemental design agreement number 2 for improvements to West Street, Harry Tupani.
Morning, Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. The item before you this morning is proposed design concept for the intersection of West Street, Harry, and Southwest Boulevard. This is turned out to be a fairly large and complex project, and so I've got quite a bit to cover, but I'll try to get through it quickly. This project's been in the CIP for some time. We've known, just because of the kind of the unique situation of the intersection, the complexity, that is something that we've taken a look at over the years in different manners, looking at the existing configuration of the traffic signals, trying to make improvements. It's now at a point in the CIP, and we have been awarded federal money through WAMPO that I'll talk about soon to help with these improvements, especially because of the size of the project. Community Investments Plan shows this corridor in particular of West Street, which you see in red on the map, from Kellogg basically to 47th Street South, almost to the city limits, as being one of the largest projected new employment areas in the city through 2035. Some of that we've seen already along the corridor with things like what Foley Equipment had done near Harry Street over the last several years. We're seeing an increase in traffic counts, particularly in truck movements, which has a big impact on this intersection now and will into the future. Just to talk real quickly about what's happening in this corridor right now and what's coming, just so you can kind of get a better feel of the overall impact of what we're trying to do in future projects on West Street. Starting at the top end, what's shown in red is a project that is now under construction to improve west from Kellogg to Harry to widen out to 5 lanes. We're about halfway through that project right now. Expect to be done sometime in the spring. The green that you see is the project we'll be discussing today. If you continue south, the red circle is the improvements that KDOT is currently making to particularly the west side of the interchange at 235 and West Street, primarily the bridges over the railroad and the ramps. We partnered with KDOT on that, funding that the council had previously approved to provide traffic signals for the ramp terminals. And then going south of that, everything you see in the blue is upcoming projects that are programmed into the capital improvement program to start design on this coming year to make improvements to West Street all the way down to 47th Street South. Those two projects will probably be built together, are currently programmed in the CIP for 2023 and 2024. We're starting to see more growth in that area, particularly at the south end, especially that's generating truck traffic too. And with the rural standard of the roadway there now being a 2-lane road with ditches for drainage, improvements are definitely going to be needed sooner than later. All of this is being done in an effort, again, to provide the necessary infrastructure for projected job growth, freight, and commerce throughout the corridor. One other thing I might mention that's not shown on here, if you look just to the left, if you can tell of the green there where the 235 and Southwest Boulevard interchange is, City of Wichita, in a partnership with Jeff Lang Development, was awarded cost share funding from KDOT to make improvements to Southwest Boulevard, basically between the ramp terminals of 235. Those improvements will help with projected traffic increases for a development that Lang has at Brightwater Bay. Also will help with the existing issues that we've had with traffic, especially during shift changes at Textron to the west. So it'll be a really good benefit for new development and existing traffic in the area. So to focus then on the project we're talking about today, primarily at Pawnee, Southwest Boulevard, and West Street, which extends all the way to Harry and ties into the existing roadway. I want to talk a little bit about the background, some of the history we've been through. Back in April of 2018, the City Council first approved funding for design concept. Through 2018 and 2019, we had numerous stakeholder meetings, particularly meeting with the larger users of the intersection, those that have trucks going through on a regular basis, contractors, equipment suppliers. We've got some really valuable input from them looking at the various options that I'm going to show you today. And we needed to make sure that we could serve those users first and foremost while being able to accommodate the daily traffic going through there. In February of this year, the City Council approved a supplemental design agreement for additional traffic modeling and looking at additional options. And then in November, the District 4 Advisory Board unanimously approved the proposed design concept you'll see today. So talking real quick about the existing intersection configuration. Overall, there's 2 major roads from the east that merge into the intersection and continue to the west. The intersection itself is difficult to navigate, especially for large trucks. And again, with this being in a highly commercial industrial area, the percentage of trucks generally in this area is almost twice of what we see on a lot of our arterial roadways. So that was one of our focuses, looking through design concepts to be able to continue to provide access and efficient movement for those trucks through the intersection. I might mention, and this is something that we'll talk about in just a minute with the proposed concept, is that the traffic counts on Southwest Boulevard, especially the northeast leg you see there, are the smallest for the intersection. So that became a big factor as we developed designs. Really the focus needed to be on Pawnee and West Street and the intersection of those two streets, and trying to figure out a way to how to still accommodate Southwest Boulevard. The current traffic counts total through the intersection around 25,000 vehicles per day, and that includes a large percentage of trucks, and we expect those to only increase as development continues along the corridor. This is just a quick picture showing one of the real inherent problems of the intersection, and you look at the close proximity of the signals. There's quite a bit of movement from westbound Pawnee to go west again on Southwest Boulevard. Truck making a turning movement like this effectively takes up the whole intersection during certain periods of time. It creates some confusion and certainly creates additional delay. I think over time, just like a lot of areas of our city, even with the size of our city, a lot of people get accommodated to certain areas. A lot of the same traffic goes through the same areas. They start to learn how to navigate it in certain ways, but we can't count on that and shouldn't make them have to do that to provide for a more efficient intersection. Part of the improvements is West Street itself. This is actually just south of Perry looking to the south. West Street is currently a 4-lane roadway. Again, with the significant amount of commercial and industrial traffic through here, there's a large number of truck turning movements. Our proposal would include widening this to 5 lanes to provide a dedicated center turn lane. That will provide additional traffic efficiency and safety throughout the West Street corridor itself. We did take a look, and I know this picture does not show it. This is actually one of the worst areas of pavement, but as you get further south here where the truck and the vehicles are, the pavement condition's pretty good in the area. So one of the things that we've looked at for cost savings for the project is probably just to widen this long stretch of West Street to provide the 5 lanes instead of looking at full reconstruction. And I think based on that, we were going to be able to save at least several $1 million on the project cost. So with some of the pavement rehabilitation methods we have now, looking at this with our maintenance staff, we think it makes a lot of sense. So I wanted to talk briefly about options we had looked at. You know, when this project really first came to light and we knew funding would be available in the CIP and through WAMPO, one of our thoughts was to try to look at a roundabout, and we had hoped at one time this would be a way to not have any more traffic signals. Roundabouts can work really well in certain situations, can provide more efficiency, provide a lot better long-term operations and maintenance costs, and the ability to handle traffic. We spent quite a bit of time looking at both a single roundabout and then a double roundabout you see on the right. In the end, though, we could not create enough separation between entrance and exit legs to really create a safe intersection. The size of the single roundabout created some unsafe traffic volumes and speeds within the roundabout itself. And then even on the double, some of the same concerns really came into play there. And then both of these options ultimately were not really large truck friendly. You'll see some of these in different areas, even across the state, that can work well. A lot of them don't have the truck volume that we do in this area. There's a location of the K&O Railroad, which is just to the bottom right of both of these pictures. Also presented some challenges, and I'll talk a bit more about that railroad in just a minute, but for a roundabout in particular, if you get a train stop there, it can back traffic up into the roundabout, which we would have no control over like you would with the traffic signal itself. So that became a driving factor on this too. We then looked at some split options for the intersection itself, and what this did was it still created somewhat of a primary focus for Southwest Boulevard, even though you'll recall I mentioned that the traffic counts are fairly low on Southwest Boulevard itself. Both of these options handle traffic well, but ultimately we were concerned with meter driver expectancy and creating some confusion. We can do a lot of good things with signage, But even with that, there's going to be some challenges with diverting Pawnee, westbound traffic in particular, to Southwest Boulevard. One of the biggest negative impacts of these options were that property impacts to and access to the properties east of West Street on the south side of Pawnee. You can see the option on the right actually has access by a cul-de-sac, which can work, probably not real viable for those businesses in the future. The one on the left was actually going to be eastbound only. That creates problems too with being able to get people to those properties. So we kept on looking and came to a point of this option, which is what we were recommending today. This really does a lot of things for the intersection. It prioritizes Pawnee and West Street, which I talked about as being the primary movements where most of the 25,000 vehicles a day comes from. We have some fairly sophisticated traffic modeling that our design consultant and staff use to run current and future traffic counts, including the trucks, through the intersection. It looks at overall delay, looks at efficiency of the intersection. And so what you see is Southwest Boulevard coming into Pawnee, east of the intersection, which is one of the best ways we could find to effectively deal with that traffic movement, which is again is the lowest one. These intersection connections, again, will prioritize the major traffic movements with this realignment. One of the things that this does is eastbound Pawnee does not even actually go through the other signal and is where we get the continuous green. With the traffic modeling, with the turning lanes that we've been able to add, it's a little bit hard to see on this small of a scale, but we've got significant dedicated turning lanes in every direction. Our modeling shows that we can create the best efficiency through the intersection with this. It will meet driver expectancy a lot better than the other options that we looked at, allowing the two heaviest movements to not be diverted. It allows only one signal on West Street and one on Pawnee. And again, I mentioned that would be a continuous green. So I'll show you this again in a minute, including the overall project. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about real quick was an evaluation matrix we looked at with all of the options. And this is typical in options we look at on major arterial corridors. I talked about driver expectancy. Signing is a big issue I mentioned that goes hand in hand with that to make sure we can effectively get people where they need to go. Some areas, if you're not careful, you can see an increase in crashes if there's issues with driver expectancy and creating confusion. All of the options were pretty good at large truck handling, but the second one was better, with the 3 being a better score. We look at delay through intersections, how long people have to sit typically and wait to be able to get through. Constructability and maintenance of traffic is something that we always look at through development of a project to see how we will impact properties. There's always going to be that impact during construction. We do everything we can to minimize that. Overall right-of-way impacts and, of course, construction costs. Ultimately, when we score that, the option that I've showed you came out on top of that. One of the things that I mentioned was the railroad. I want to mention again, and it's towards the left center of the screen now. We have, staff has a really good connection with the railroads and had worked with K&O early on in the development of this project. Ultimately, K&O was able to work with KDOT and was awarded grant funding. One of the challenges right now, for anybody who's spent much time in this area, is there are many times during the day where there are trains across the track there. And what the K&O is doing is building trains for Oxy Chemical, which is southwest of town. Oxy Chemical now has received a grant to build additional trackage and a facility basically closer to their site to build the trains down there. So the number of times that trains will be across these tracks should be significantly reduced. That became a big factor in our ability to look at options for the overall intersection. This shows the full project, north being to the right, it's kind of tipped on its side. It also includes the improvements to West Street that I talked about. So, moving on from discussion of the concept itself, the design fee to date is just over $230,000. The full cost of the supplemental design agreement to complete design is $993,000 for a total design fee of just under $1,225,000. Because of the available funding in the CIP, we are asking approval of a partial supplemental design agreement contract amount today for $731,776, and project then be returned at a later date for approval of the remaining funds to complete the design, and then for the construction funding. I mentioned before, this project was awarded almost $8 million in construction funding through WAMPO to be included in the Transportation Improvement Program. The other projects I mentioned further south on West Street, south of 235, have also been awarded federal funding. So WAMPO and KDOT have also recognized the significance of this corridor. So the existing budget of $265,000, today we're requesting $500,000 be approved. That is in the 2021 and the current CIP for a total budget of $765,000. With that, staff recommends that the City Council approve the design concept, the revised budget, supplemental design agreement number 2, adopt the amending resolutions, and authorize the necessary signatures, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Council Member or Vice Mayor Playco.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Gary. Can we go back to slide number 88, please?
That's 93.
Okay. 88.
We're getting there.
Yes,
There. So, Gary, my question is, are we reconfiguring Southwest Boulevard? I mean,
yeah, we are, and I apologize that I went through that fairly quick. I should have spent a little bit more time on this. Because of the, if you look at the upper leg of Southwest Boulevard that you see there, the one that's curving down into Pawnee, that is the least amount of traffic we have going through this entire intersection, even with projected growth in the future. Because of that, redirecting Southwest Boulevard into Pawnee at this location, basically that traffic signal that you see there just deals with that traffic between that portion of Southwest Boulevard and Pawnee only. It created a real efficiency here to be able to, there's a fair amount of truck turning movements there. So they basically have a free ride on red. And then we end up bringing all the traffic together at one single intersection at Pawnee and West Street. So we kind of sort those out outside the main intersection. There's not a lot of traffic coming from the west on K42. And most of what does come that way ends up going either direction on West Street. And hopefully that answers most of your question. There's a lot of details here, especially when we looked at the overall traffic modeling and being able to look at the delays. This configuration of these two traffic signals allows us the best opportunity to coordinate and time them together based on the traffic counts coming from every direction. So it looks a little bit odd when you first look at it, but when you think about the idea of the traffic counts and dealing with the primary movements, what I would say again is this kind of helps get that traffic into the queue outside the main intersection, if that makes sense.
yeah. So those little streets, little legs off of there, those are access roads to some of those properties where Southwest Boulevard won't run through there?
Those are access roads, correct. So there's actually a frontage road along Southwest Boulevard. That does not change. That
Okay.
access does not change. Anybody in this area, on the northeast area of this quadrant, their access to Southwest Boulevard would not change.
Okay. Yeah, I think this makes sense. I was just kind of concerned about those properties, how they were going to get to them. I mean, I knew you'd figured it out, but I wanted to know, so.
I'm not so sure. It's been a long process, and I'm glad to hear that you think it makes sense. So.
Thank you.
Further questions? There's no further discussion or questions on this item. The chair will recognize Councilmember Bluebog for a motion as this falls into District 4.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you to staff. Thank you to everybody here. This has been something that we've worked on for several years. West Street remains to be the iron workhorse of manufacturing for the state of Kansas. There's not much vacancy as far as land right now on West Street, and I'm excited to see it grow and see it prosper. This is going to be huge for not just Southwest Wichita, but for all the cities. So I'm very excited about this project. So I want to take the recommended action to approve the design concept, revised budget, supplemental design agreement number 2, and adopt the amending resolution and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. No discussion on the motion. Members cast the vote. With a result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Owner's advisor for the biological nutrient removal concept phase project.
Good morning,
Welcome, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Alan King, Director of Public Works and Utilities. I'm bringing before you today a contract with a owner's advisor for the biological nutrient removal project. The city operates 5 sewer treatment plants. They discharge into water bodies like the Arkansas River. And one of the requirements that we have is to meet permit requirements for that discharge. There are upcoming requirements for the reduction of what they call biological nutrient removals, which is primarily phosphorus and nitrogen. In order to meet that requirement, there's going to have to be some modifications to some of our facilities. We're anticipating that's out into the future, but these sorts of changes take time, and so we're starting the work right now. It's what we're talking about here is a capital improvement program of the 2019 through 20 of $1 million for evaluation and design of this project, with another $355 million for construction in the 2024 through 2028 years. So as you can see, this is a significant project. Back in January of 2020, the council received a workshop by staff, and we presented what it is that the challenge that we're trying to work here, and an approach, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, that we think maximizes the use of the money and protects for future requirements by regulators. Back in July 7th, 2020, City Council approved a preliminary design agreement with Burns and McDowell Engineering, and that work is underway right now. So when you look at the overall program timeline for this, we are in the process now. That green rectangle shows under 2020 and 2021. That's the work that's being done right now by Burns and Mac. And what they're doing is coming up with the very beginning ideas about what is these improvements, what are they going to look like, and then also ultimately developing a letter of interest for the WIFIA fund and the state revolving loan fund, so that we can get the same kind of favorable financing that we received with the water treatment plant. So that's all part of the plan, is for this preliminary work to result in that letter of interest that we can submit for WIFIA funding. The work that we're talking about here is called owner's advisor or owner's rep. And what we do is we have a consulting company oversee and review the work that's done by the design contract consultant, to not only look at different opportunities for savings, but also to make sure that it's consistent with what the city's trying to do in terms of objectives. What we're talking about today is a early concept contract, the preliminary contract, just to cover the time during the conceptual engineering design work. And at that point, the contract is structured in such a way that if the consultant and the city are both agreeable, it can then continue on with a next phase of owner's advisor services during the rest of the design, because after the preliminary design work is done, we're going to have a second effort for the full design, leading ultimately to construction packages being issued so that we can actually have the construction done on this project. So what we're talking about today is just the initial owner's advisor services during the concept or preliminary design, and later on we'll be coming back to the council to either issue another RFP to continue with another firm, or to continue with the firm that we're asking to enter into today. The owner's advisor adds value to the project, evaluates the cost and the schedule to make sure that it's reasonable and achievable. There's also an opportunity here for us to get value-added engineering. With a design-build approach, you have the designer and the contractor working together to identify opportunities to, through value-added engineering, get savings on the project. Because this is a design bid build, we'll be coming back later with design packages to actually ask for construction, individual construction projects. The opportunity for us to achieve that value-added engineering is with this owner's representative working with the city and the design engineer to identify those particular savings. We're also looking at their role to make sure that they meet all the regulatory requirements, and then also to review the letter of interest that we'll be getting at the end of this for the WIFIA funding. Another important thing is in looking at risk mitigation so that we can figure out what is the best way for us to present this project that reduces the risk to the city, both in terms of the outcome of the project, but also the financing. The RFP was published back in August 14 of this year. The proposals that were due back in September 11th, we had a legal review of the proposal, and we only received one firm proposing on these services. That was Garber. So what we did was we sent that one proposal to the selection and screening committee that we had in place to review multiple proposals if they should come in. It includes 3 members of city council and 2 stakeholder representatives, and there was a unanimous approval of the proposal by Garber. So we're talking about a owner's advisor contract during the concept phase. If the terms are agreeable to the owner's advisor and to the city, we can proceed with, have that contract proceed to the next phase, which is the actual design phase and part of the development of bid packages. During the design phase, if we decide that we're agreeable, again, we can extend these services through the construction phase, which will follow the design phase when the work is actually being done. Getting back to the concept phase that we're in right now, a more detailed look at that. Right now we're in the process of doing, looking at treatment processes, piloting them, looking at various scenario developments. The idea being that before we lock into any one particular approach, we'd like to have the benefit of running some real world tests on our treatment facilities, pilot projects, to see what kinds of treatment processes would best serve the city. We've been working closely with KDHE. They've been looking at this approach. They approve and agree with what it is we're doing, because so much of this is best available technology. What they're looking at is the city taking the lead by looking at what are the various ways that this can be achieved, and then actually putting together some pilot tests to test those, with the idea being that after these pilot tests, what we'll be designing is the most efficient, most effective form of treatment to meet these regulatory requirements. Also, and I might state that another consideration is we know that in the future, 5 more years, 10 more years after that, these requirements for removing nitrogen and phosphorus are going to tighten up. We know that. And so we anticipate that after the construction of this facility, there will be, in the future for that facility, there will be additional tighter requirements. So we're looking at ways to try to figure out and anticipate what sorts of processes will provide the least amount of sunk costs, throwaway costs that can be used to meet those future requirements. So that's one of the things we're looking at with the pilot testing. The other part of it too is we don't want to make this basically just an evaluation on the lowest capital cost. We also want to look at what are the ongoing operating costs, because these facilities will be in place for decades. And so one of the things we're asking as part of this very preliminary design is for the consultants to consider the total costs, replacement, operation, initial capital costs, and to do a business case evaluation of some different combinations of treatment facility improvements and processes that we will be experimenting with the pilot program that are underway, with the idea that we will be bringing back to City Council a couple of possible ways of constructing this, at least two design concepts. One based on getting as close as possible to the budgeted amount for this project, and the other being not necessarily constrained by that amount, but what is the lowest total cost for into the future and protecting those future treatment requirements. What does that look like? So that we'll be coming back to council and saying, here are a couple of ways to do it. Here are the business case evaluations associated with both of those to get some direction from council on that. We'll also be asking council to approve the letter of interest that we'll be submitting to EPA, similar to the process that we used when we proceeded with the water treatment plant. And then ultimately, you're going to have, during the WIFIA selection process, we'll have to ask the question, do we want to continue with Burns and Mack on the rest of the design, or is there somebody else that would also like to do that work and try to take advantage of competition the best we can? So the financial project considerations of this stage that we're in now is, like I said, there's $1 million in evaluation, evaluation and design right now. We have a contract with Burns and Mack for $850,000. The work that we're talking about with Garver to do these services is $294,254, which is about 35%. And that's in the ballpark. That's a reasonable number of what we would expect for these services to cost when you compare it to the preliminary design efforts that will be underway. In order to make both of those come together for the $1 million budget that we have, we propose that we transfer $150,000 from the sewer CIP to this BNR project for this stage, and that requires a waiver of the use of project savings policy, and that's what we're bringing forward today for your consideration. So the recommendation is to adopt the amending resolutions, approve the agreement for owner representative services with Garver, and to authorize a necessary signature. And that concludes staff's presentation.
All right, questions for staff? See none, let's jump into discussion, the item. If there's no discussion, then I will make the motion we might have, Naomi, do we have anyone over at C2 who wanted to speak to this?
He's just here for questions, if anybody has any.
Okay, I don't think we do. So if there's no questions, no discussion, then I will make the motion and take staff's recommended action to approve the OA concept phase contract with Garver, approve a waiver of the use of the project savings policy, adopt the amending resolutions, and authorize the necessary signatures. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. There's no discussion. Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. Councilmember Clendenin votes aye. Councilmember Bluebog is absent. Shall be recorded as absent. With a 6 yeas to 1 absent, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Naming Advisory Committee for Evergreen Library Community Center.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council. Sarah Craig-Milligan with the City Manager's Office with the Naming Advisory Committee proposal for the Combined Library and Community Center in District 6. In July of this year, Council approved the initiation of work on the Evergreen Library renovation project. This renovation will allow for the co-location of the library and its functions with the Neighborhood Resource Center and its functions, and allow for the addition of collaboration spaces and offices for community service providers. The ultimate goal of this combined facility is that it will reflect the vibrancy and character of the community it serves and become a true anchor institution for the area. The funding for this project comes from $1 million of Hyatt sale proceeds for the remodel of the Evergreen Resource Center and $650,000 in CIP funding budgeted in accordance with the master plan for branch libraries. Move-in is planned for fourth quarter of 2021. With this new life should come a name to reflect the facility's new use. City Council Policy 13 specifies that a naming advisory committee be used in the naming of public facilities. The library board meets the requirements outlined in this policy. Law Department review has affirmed that the library board meets the requirements regarding the composition of a naming committee for a public facility, and that Section 10 of the policy gives the City Council the authority to designate the 14 members of the library board as the naming advisory committee for this facility. Therefore, it's the recommendation that the City Council designate the library board as the naming advisory committee for the renovated Evergreen Library project. And with that, I will be happy to stand for any questions. And Denise Peters with the Center for Project Management is here to answer any questions you may have as well.
Questions for staff? Any discussion? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you. Really just more of a comment. The Hyatt hotel sale continues to give and give. We had 2 projects today that are going to benefit from it. So I want to ask the manager, do we have anything else we can sell? Any more hotels in our portfolio? So.
Other comments? All right, if none, the chair will recognize Vice Mayor Claycomb as this falls into District 6.
Thank you. I'd like to take staff recommended action to designate the library board of directors to serve as the naming advisory committee for the new community facility.
I will second the motion. Motion has been made and seconded. Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the votes. We'll look towards Councilmember Clendenin, who gives us a thumbs up. I'll be voting yes. And Councilmember Bluebog will be recorded as absent. So with a result of 6-1, the motion does pass. 6 yeas to 1 absent. Madam Clerk.
2021 Insurance Program.
Welcome, sir. Morning.
City Council. Joel Needens, Department of Finance. Item before you today is 2021 Insurance Program. Each year, finance staff are responsible for placing 11 different lines of insurance policies and position bonds to protect city assets. City Code authorizes the purchasing division to acquire and purchase coverage, subject to City Council ratification. The process allows staff to collaborate with departments to determine their needs and provides a partnership with an insurance broker to allow market access and pricing on a scale not achievable by internal staff alone. Related costs and premiums are either paid by the self-insurance fund or funded within department budgets. If someone wanted to review the insurance terms in a bit more detail, the CAPR would be a good, quick resource. Currently, the insurance industry is experiencing a hard market. Claims activity, hurricanes, wildfires in the West have dramatically affected carrier access, rates, and policy terms. This morning, I wanted to focus on the 2 lines most affected by this market that involves the city. First, let's look at property insurance. City insures buildings with values in excess of $1 billion. Based on these values, rates will increase by 18% for a premium totaling over $945,000. On a per unit basis, rates are comparable with other hard market periods. You might have to look back to 2012 or 13 to find comparable rates, but it is cyclical. With a hard market also brings a tightening of terms. City wind hail deductibles will increase from $500,000 per occurrence to 2% of the total insured value for each location, with a $500,000 minimum deductible for each location. All other perils will see deductibles increase from $100,000 to $250,000. Flood deductibles will increase from $250,000 to $500,000. I might add that adding those last 2 deductibles did drop our rates considerable and will save the overall premium over $89,000 in cost. Second item I wanted to bring up would be excess general liability. For excess general liability, it's been a hard market as well. resulting in a very limited number of carriers providing this type of insurance. The total premium cost for this line will increase by 91% to over $625,000. The good news is the city has been fortunate, more than others, for being able to maintain the same levels of coverage that we've enjoyed over the past years. With that, staff recommends the City Council receive, file, and ratify the 2021 insurance program, and I'd be happy to stand for questions.
All right, questions of staff? There are no questions. Discussion. Chair recognizes the city manager.
Verl, you may want to talk to the council about how you analyze the impact of deductible options.
Our broker is locked in out of Kansas City, and we asked them to do a study on the probability of loss for the deductibles. And based on the information we have, based on our values, based on the probability of an actual storm moving through and hitting several of our locations, they felt the probability was like a 0.4% chance of every 500 years. Now, you can never say never, but the probability is low. We felt then too that increasing the flood deductible from, I think it's 250 to 500,000, and it's a never say never again, but in the 25 years I've been here, we've not had a flood claim at all. And we felt that we need to take advantage of some cost savings by increasing the deductible on something that's likely not to occur.
Further discussion? Seeing none. With that, I will make the recommendation or make the motion to take staff's recommended action to receive and file and ratify the 2021 insurance program, subject to any necessary minor modifications and verification of coverage details. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. No discussion on motion. Clerk, open the rolls. Items cast the votes. Councilmember Clendenin has his thumb up and thus will be recorded as a yay. With a result of 6 yeas to 1 absent, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Ordinance creating the Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights Board.
Welcome back, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Whipple. Good morning. Good morning, Mayor Whipple, members of the City Council. Dante Martin, Assistant City Manager. I'm here to present an ordinance to create the Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights Board. In June 2020, City Council confirmed appointments to an advisory council to the mayor on diversity, inclusion, and civil rights. The Public Policy Management Center of Wichita State provided support to the advisory council, facilitated meetings, and engaged the advisory council in the development of an ordinance that would formalize a diversity, inclusion, and civil rights advisory board. An outline of the ordinance developed by the board was presented to City Council in a workshop, has been revised to be consistent with other city boards by staff, and is now being presented for adoption. The purpose of the proposed Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights Advisory Board would be to help create an organizational culture that values diversity, civil rights, and inclusion, as well as address barriers and discrimination. The board would identify and address discrimination and other barriers, assist staff in initiating equitable strategies, and to connect City of Wichita with community partners. The proposed ordinance defines the purpose, specific duties, membership, qualifications, terms of office, structure, and authority of the board. If council were to approve the ordinance and the board was formalized, staff proposes that the PPMC during the first 2 years of the board's existence assist the board with training and development, meeting facilitation, developing and executing work plans, as well as serve as a liaison between the board, city staff, and community partners. A city staff person appointed by the city manager would serve as ex officio, and staff liaisons would assist the board as needed. It is recommended that council approve the first reading of the ordinance, endorse the proposal, approve the agreement, and authorize necessary signatures. I'm available for questions, and LaShonda Garnes from PPMC, I believe, is at Wichita, is at Century 2 as well.
Naomi, my understanding is there is a speaker there in support of this that doesn't need to speak, but is there a member for the PPMC who's there who would like to speak, or anyone else who would like to speak to this item?
They're just standing for questions, sir.
Excellent. All right, so with that, let's start with questions, and if there's no questions, let's move into discussion on the item. Chair recognizes Vice Mayor Flacco.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just preface this with I am in favor of creating this advisory board, but I have some technical questions about the ordinance. And so my first is that it's not clear to me who appoints the 17 members. It says that they shall be appointed from the broadest possible base and from these groups. And then at the end, it says 6 community members, 1 appointment per council member. So I'm trying to figure out who appoints the other 11.
Jennifer, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's the intent of the ordinance for the mayor and city council to appoint all members of the board.
So could we say that in there, that it'll be appointed by, I don't see that it says it. Maybe I'm...
Yes, correct. I agree with Dante that it is the intent. I think it could be read from that. But for clarity's purposes, we can certainly add those members are appointed by the mayor and council, and then the other appointments are by individual board members.
Okay. And then my next question has to do with the statement that they shall disclose any conflict of interest. And I just think it ought to probably say as defined in their bylaws. Otherwise, there's no definition. And I suppose you could go to our code of ethics once we pass that and all that, but I just think it ought to say that.
Staff will make that change. Thank you.
Thank you. And then there's section 7, item 7, and I'm just going to read this. It says the city council shall reserve the right to review all decisions of subsidiary boards and commissions, except as otherwise provided by law, in order that aggrieved citizens may have the right of appeal to an elected body from the decision of the appointed body of the city. And I'm not sure why that's in there, because this is an advisory board.
Yes, Vice Mayor Jennifer Magana. As written, there is no authority for this board to sit and make rulings like that. So this language is probably not relevant to this ordinance as it is maybe for some other boards. So it would be my recommendation just to strike it before the second reading.
I just don't want anybody to think that the board has some sort of authority to make accusations or findings against citizens, and that kind of implies that. So, and then there is a secretary position on this board, and it says that the elected secretary will be responsible for recording, preparing, and maintaining minutes. So most of the boards I serve on, there's an ex officio person that does that. And I know we have ex officio secretary defined earlier. I just think it would be a lot for a volunteer to be responsible for that. Is that?
I don't think that's a problem, Vice Mayor. I think much of the language that you see in the ordinance was adopted from other boards that we have throughout the city. It makes sense in this case if we have an ex officio to serve in that purpose, in that capacity.
Let me just make that clear. And then my last question has to do with approval of the board's bylaws. And I know that some of our city boards, council approves, some doesn't. My question is, will legal review the bylaws?
I think that's done in other reviews. We can certainly build that in and make that a part of this ordinance.
I'm fine with that. Thank you. Those are all of my questions and concerns.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Council Member Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Following along with the Vice Mayor, I've been toying with this all weekend, but Jennifer, you mentioned, so we have the 6 community members, 1 appointment per council member, but we have 17 potential positions, and you mentioned that maybe the board makes recommendations or appointments for the others?
Well, I think the way you could read this is that the council makes all appointments, but each individual council member gets to nominate one of the 6 individual appointments. But I think all are approved by the board. If that's, I'm just trying to determine the intent of the drafters. No, right. They're all approved by council. I'm sorry I wasn't clear on that, but yes, they're all to be approved and voted on by council.
So my understanding, just to jump in here, was the 6 was to ensure that each council member had an appointment, but all, and I'm guessing the mayor appoints, would also have an appointment, because the mayor's not in here. I think that could be interpreted as the mayor appoints, if there's, out of those 6 that are appointed, folks who don't fall into diverse categories of populations of interest. They, but all appointments are ratified by the body. So I don't think it is that 6 members who the council appoints get to appoint the rest of the 17. I don't think that was the intent. I think it's all to be ratified by the body, but also to ensure that council members also had at least one person that they could appoint.
Mayor, I'm not sure that we know for sure the intent of the group, so it'd probably be good for the council to decide that today, if that's how, whatever your appointment process is. I'm not sure they thought that level of detail regarding who makes a nomination and who ratifies.
Well, my co-chair was also in attendance alongside myself in every one of these meetings, so maybe he could help us with what the intent was, but I believe ratified by the body. So I think that would go without saying, but go ahead.
Yeah, we actually never got too detailed about this piece of it. We were focused more on getting to this point. But as far as process, I would like for consideration, maybe we all appoint 2 people. That gives us, with the mayor, 14 of the 17, and then I forget which board the mayor has additional appointments for already, but that would give the mayor 3 additional appointments to make that we all would vote on. But at that point, we would all get 2 appointments and fill most of the board, and those would be folks recommended by council members already. Just my thought. That's all I have.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. I just also want to preface that I'm going to be supportive. I had a question about the 17 members and where the other 11 came from. Seems like a reasonable suggestion. My other question, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds, and maybe this is just our standard language, but on Section 6, Item 3B, regarding COMA and CORA, I always think that's really important, and it just says that the COMA and CORA training will be provided by the city within a reasonable time after appointment. And usually within our DAVs, I kind of think they have to go through the COMA CORA training before they can get sworn in, and maybe I'm making that up, but it just seems like I probably wouldn't want people participating and making, voting until they truly understood the importance of COMA and CORA and what it meant. So if that's standard language, I'm okay with it, but it would seem like maybe we could clean that up just a little bit. Thank you.
I think it is standard language for some boards, but it could certainly be clarified in the, if council prefers it to be conducted before the members are sworn in. It's up to the council.
Thank you, Jen.
Councilmember Frye.
So looking at the members that we're looking to make sure we have representation from 10 different bodies to consider, if we go and each one of us nominate 2, then how do we make sure that we're not all nominating from one considered group? So, you follow what I'm saying? Okay. I didn't use the King's English there. So, I mean, if we were to take this as making sure we had one from each one of these 10 groups, that would still allow an appointment from all 7 of us to hit the 17. It's how do we make sure that we're getting 10 people from each one of these groups that we all agree on.
Right.
That could be done as a ratified vote, but getting to those identified 10 is not something we've done before. So it's a
Well,
new
and that's-
process.
Yeah, and to your point, I think that's one of the reasons why I think the mayor was to work with the council to appoint and assure that we hit all the groups necessary, while also ensuring that each member of the council had at least one person they could.
Right, and again, I can see where each one of us, our individual appointments, could end up having a second person from the veterans group or the homelessness group, right? And that's fine, but I just want to get into a place where we had 8 people from one group or something. And so making sure that we're balanced, that's just the concern of being open.
Vice Mayor jumped on, so are you?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Vice Mayor Playcomb.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on what Councilmember Fry said. So I know this is a little different, but design council is like this, where we have certain roles we have to fill. Now, I know council doesn't have appointees to that, but maybe something like that where, I'm not sure how to do it. I mean, we could, each of the council members have one appointee, and then the mayor, with the ratification of the council members, fill in from the other spots. I kind of like the 2 per council member, but I'm like Councilmember Fry, I'm not sure how we then get all those groups represented.
And just to add to that, if it's done right, then the larger portion that gets appointed will be done with purpose.
Yeah,
right. So by working with, and I think that the mayor was with the additional staff support, was to make those other appointments. I thought that was the intent. But in doing that, when other members recommend folks, then we can ensure that that it hits all the categories that are required. And then I do like the input from the other council members, of course, to make sure that folks from different areas are represented. But yeah, that was we don't want to get into a situation where, like what Councilmember Fry said, where we have over-representation of one group or another. So, Councilmember Tuttle?
I just kind of to follow up on the same thing, when we're looking at the different categories, it says with consideration from the following groups. That, I mean, consideration to me means, it's not, it has to be from one of those groups. I mean, that doesn't clarify anything or address this, but again, the word consideration just seems a little loose. I mean, if it has to be from these groups, then we say must, and if it's, just a recommendation, then some of this may take care of itself, and we don't have to check the certain boxes, if that makes sense.
Councilmember Fry?
Thank you. I think one way we might be able to do this, and following along the lines with the design council, is that the city manager and the mayor work together on identifying the non-council member appointments with these groups as being considerate, and then those members, or those suggestions, those nominees, are brought to the council for consideration prior to a council meeting, so that it's not day of trying to decide, is this person right for this? And that way we can really kind of craft this in a way that we're making sure we're getting representation from as many different groups as possible. We're not going forward and, overstacking one area or another, but giving the mayor and the manager the opportunity to craft those other 10 positions, I think is a good way to do it. Similar to what we do with design council.
Yeah, I like that.
I think, if I may, Vice Mayor and Councilmember Council, I think that's an excellent idea. Janet Johnson coordinates our board and commission appointment process. She would be the person coordinating the application process. She could recruit into these groups and develop a list and provide to the manager for review and to follow your example.
Well, and let me just add that to this. Of course, staff would be helping, and so far this is discussion. We have to make hard amendments to actually make changes to what's written and vote on those amendments. But as we're discussing what will likely be a potential clarification amendment, I do want to be certain with the language that this board and the members will be appointed by the elected body with help from the staff, but I definitely want to make sure that it's not interpreted that the staff has to, or the manager, or the administrative side of our government has to approve the list before it gets to the body. And also, I would be hesitant unless staff could help me with this, is if there is another, because some of it, is there precedence for presenting a list of appointees for prior approval outside the meeting, and then like requiring that, and then bringing it to the meeting for a vote? And if there's not precedence, my concern is the idea that on this particular board we targeted for a process that isn't a process normally followed.
Mayor, council members, I believe the council followed a similar process when it was putting the revised transit board together. I think at that time we had to coordinate members and make sure that there were appropriate representatives on that board. And then, of course, with the design council, the mayor has made those nominations, so that's been the coordination in that regard.
So the mayor makes the nominations, but
Has to follow guidelines in terms of the backgrounds of those individuals.
okay, but before we make an amendment to clarify section O with the idea, and of course, we also have to kind of collaborate and work just as a body, even if we're not directed to through ordinance. So but in that process, there isn't a first read that has to go, because I think we get concerns with that too, like what if we have a list ready to go, we need to get moving on this, and like a member's on vacation, we get it passed by everyone else. Do we have to wait on that? I'm worried about putting an extra barrier to getting members of this board working in action if that barrier also hasn't been played out in another scenario in which we can see how it's worked.
Right. Probably this, without, again, making sausage from the bench, maybe the best thing to do is that the council members make their appointments ahead of the mayor. And those 6 members are picked, and then the mayor needs to fill the gaps in his or her appointments going forward. That way, I think you can take care of this issue of balance.
That would be, if we put that in context, then it would be a date in which the council would have to submit their appointments, and then a mayor would submit in the next week, so that a council member couldn't sit on their appointments and attempt to hold up the board then. So, or if a council member was on vacation and the board needed to meet, didn't make their appointments yet. I'm just making sausage from the bench, I guess, which I hate that term, but I'm trying to think this through, where if we went forward with that, where the council members would have a timeline to make their or I guess a date to make their appointments, then that would give time for the mayor to make appointments afterwards to fill in any missing areas. I like that. I guess we have to look at the language, though. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Now, 2 things. First, I don't know if I would call it precedence, but former Mayor Longwell a couple of times reached out to council members before making an appointment, just seeing if we had any suggestions, and then he weighed that, I'm assuming, with the city manager, and then would make an appointment from recommendations we might have made. So I guess it's not formal policy, but it's happened, and I think we're collaborative enough to where we could do that. My initial comment, though, was going to say, on the application process, could we not potentially add these as like check boxes and say check all that apply? And then if those folks, we can look and see where the intersectionality is, and then if there's areas where we're missing out, we know it already.
I would have to verify with Janet Johnson, but I believe we can, Councilmember Johnson. I know that we use a software that may have some limitations in terms of what we can do online, but I imagine we could implement or adopt your recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. That would help us out. Councilmember Claycomb.
So I just have a comment. The only time this is a challenge, really, is this first time. It's like design council. The first time it's the issue. So if we can just come up with a process, because after that, then it's just, one person leaves or two people leave and you fill it. So it's not an ongoing issue. It's just a challenge right now, figuring out, okay, how do we sequence this voting to ensure that we get all of these groups considered? So one way might be if we did have okay, so the council members do their 6. If we talked with the mayor and said, here's the group or groups I'm considering making my appointment from, that would give you some idea that, okay, well then I need to look in these groups because, Vice Mayor's got this one covered. And so
Right.
it's only a challenge during this first appointment. And so I think this is going to take some coordination and cooperation on our part.
And it means that we might not need any real changes in the ordinance if we have agreement on moving forward, because future mayors and councils won't have to figure it out.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I would commit to that process where we would have, and of course everyone would have to apply first, and I believe we all get to see who applies, and then the council would have their members that they appoint would be first, and then I'd be happy to hold off until those members are confirmed, to look at the rest of the pool of applicants and to ensure that the members who get appointed afterwards and ratified by the council meet the requirements. Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. This is probably my last in the weeds question. So is there any concern from the council on not having staggered terms? So if everybody joined and they all were able to serve their 2 terms and they all end at the same time, is there any concern about not having institutional knowledge stick around and stagger those?
I personally don't have a concern, as if you can serve up to 2 terms, it's almost always folks stay on at least 2 terms, while 1 term folks leave, and that's, of course, a handoff, would be if everyone's leaving, then we could work to ensure that folks have maybe a handbook or a packet that the last group did to get them caught up. But in my experience with, particularly with my small business council, it's a term-by-term basis, and we have some folks who get on, serve 1 term, it's all they can, and they're happy to do that, and we're happy for that. And then there are some who have been on now serving their 3rd term. So I think the idea that everyone drops off at once and then it starts a brand new seems less likely in my experience. But if so, then of course I think we could make some type of document, some type of meet and greet, I guess, to ensure that there's a transfer of that knowledge. So I personally don't, if you're asking a question to the council, I personally don't have a problem with that. And also, the other thing too is this is, I don't think it's realistic for us to assume we're going to make the perfect policy right now, right? Like we, by including Wichita State and their professionals who helped us design this, we have, I think, this period of time where if there are any changes that come up, we have that option to, people who are involved, who help create this policy, are going to be involved for at least the next 2 years. They can help us identify any changes that need to be made. And so if it was a problem, then I think that we could revisit it and make it work better. So that would be my hope as well. Councilmember Tuttle.
Just to follow up on Councilmember Johnson, thank you. I hadn't really thought that through. So if we all appoint someone and they fulfill their 2-year terms, which is 4 years, we're going to start whoever's on council will start all over again. And so this is just a suggestion, something to think about. But for this initial phase, I liked the idea of when you suggested that each council member appoint 2 people. Just a thought, maybe as a solution, and we wouldn't have to ever deal with it again. But let's say that each council member appoints 2 people, which I'm supportive of. I like that suggestion. I appoint someone for one 2-year term, and then somebody for 2 2-year terms. And that way it would be staggered, and you're not going to have an entire new group each time. And then from then on, it would never be an issue again. So that would just be one. I'd be willing to make that motion or to think about that. But that would, I think, fulfill your suggestion of each of us recommending 2 people and ensure that in 4 years, it's not going to be a blank slate.
So first off, I don't think we can or should, in one motion, recommend and confirm someone for 2 terms. I don't think every 2 years this body changes, and because of that, we have a new body, and I guess confirmation of the previous body can't actually overlap or take precedence over the confirmation of the new body. So to the point of Council Member Tuttle, I do think that in practice it probably wouldn't be warranted, as everyone would be approved for 1 term, and then if they choose to reapply for a 2nd term, they would be approved for a 2nd term if the pool of applicants showed that they should be approved. So I don't think, I just want to point that detail out. Councilmember Frye.
Thank you. Just one other catch. I don't see anywhere in here where it says a member of this board can't serve on another board as an appointee by city council. For instance, can the person serve on this board as well as the park board and so forth? I don't see it in this document.
Councilmember Frey, I believe, and I'll check, I believe that's in the general ordinances about board service.
Okay.
So it's
So
applicable
covered
to
there.
all, with the exception of them.
All right.
Vice Mayor Clicone.
Okay, so here we are making sausage from the bench. Yes, my favorite thing to do. But building on what Councilmember Tuttle said, another option would be for council, this first go around, to appoint 1 member to a 1-year term, 1 member to a 2-year term, and then move to what the ordinance says. That would make the staggered terms.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, and it would get us in sync so that the whole board didn't just drop off, right? That's what I am concerned about.
But it's never happened.
Well, it's never happened because
We've
we
never
have
had it
staggered
happen
terms. Because we have
So-
staggered terms.
My concern starting off on treating people different on this board, by some people are going to get 1 year, some people are going to get 2 years. We're already out of compliance with the ordinance. I promise I'll work with people to make sure that their nominees get into this pool. And I believe even if it's a 2-year term, I expect if nothing happens to me, I'll still be here in 2 years. And if we actually have for this one time that problem with staggering, we can put some resources into ensuring that there's a handoff of knowledge. So I'm concerned about just stepping outside of this, just even for this initial appointment process, where I think some of the problems can be addressed probably more clean, and I worry that if we, in an attempt to make this better, might run into unintended consequences or issues, such as, if folks serve a 1-year term, does that count as a term? Can they now serve 3 terms afterwards? Or I'm just concerned about overcomplicating it when I think that we can probably work it out, any of the issues out under the current language.
My concern is at 4 years. At 4 years. When everybody served their 2 terms, at 4 years, the board will dissolve. I mean, no, it won't dissolve. The people that are on it will have to leave because they're term limited, right?
Yeah, if they served 1 term and everyone came back and asked to serve another term, and then all those same exact people got reappointed because there was no other qualified applicants who stepped in and wanted to do that. Yeah, you'd be right in that particular scenario. I don't think it's common, though. I don't know if there's ever and even if that was the scenario, we'd have a heads up because of the appointment process. So if we were to, I guess, get all the applicants and it's only the people who want to serve a second term, and it's clear that because of the collaboration and the background, that's where it's going, we would have time, I think, to pass on some of that institutional knowledge to someone else. Or the board might say, hey, we're going to have a non-voting member from the past board who will sit in the back and answer questions and help out. I mean, I think there's ways to work it out. Or we come back in 2 years, we see it is a problem, and we do, at that point, it's easier to make Jagged, I guess, off terms at that point. At least we got 2 years under us going where, you know, we could make, we could actually address it then as well. The manager is clenching the microphone. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry for jumping into this. I was just reminded that the City Manager's Review Board dealt with this issue on its own and created staggered terms at their first meeting. You could allow them to do that, and maybe through their bylaws, and designate what the staggered terms would be, something to that effect. But I think at that point, initially, they didn't have term limits, and they did that themselves.
And that, I'm sure, was a meeting in which there's probably minutes kicking around that you.
Yeah,
could...
it was a public meeting.
Excellent. So we actually have something we could pass on to this board if they have the same concerns as the other board. Very good input. We will forgive you for jumping into this. Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Bob. You jumped in and took away one thing I was going to say. It wasn't my idea, but that was a really good point, and I think that could be beneficial in this. So I'll just say the reasoning why I brought it up. This board is significant to many in the community, and I personally don't see folks saying, I don't want to serve anymore. I think they'll be committed to 2 terms. And for me, even though I served on DAB before being in office, I lost half my DAB the first year, either the term or them wanting some younger folks on the DAB. And having the 5 people that stayed was invaluable. Just talking about cases, history, things I had forgotten about. Dan Heflin was amazing and just really explaining stuff. So that was my concern about staggered terms, is having somebody who had been through whatever the information was, thinking of things that everyone else might not have thought of. And if, again, I think everybody will be dedicated. You lose all of that, we can reappoint. Wichita is a big, small town. I mean, they know each other, but it's different when you served on that actual body. So that was where my concern came from, but I like Bob's solution and kicking that to them, maybe first meeting or so, and let them figure that out.
No, that's a very good point that you're highlighting, and also Bob brings up, is this, I believe Vice Mayor brought this up too, is the board actually will be empowered to create its own bylaws, and therefore the stuff that we might be, as a initial group, as its own, pretty much a start towards the direction of this group, we might be missing things, some details that I think they can, are now empowered to solve on their own with their own creation of bylaws. So that's a very good point, and that's probably one of the reasons why it's in here, is to ensure that the board itself has all the tools to be successful. Councilmember Tuttle.
I just have a quick question. In all honesty, I got a text from somebody who's on the council now, and they think that their bylaws have already been established. Is that correct? Okay, just wanted to confirm. Okay, because they were worried that the bylaws didn't get put into, and I just didn't want to make sure that we weren't trying to do something that wasn't already established. So that's what I thought, but I just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe the board will have to establish their bylaws in one of their first meetings.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, other questions on this discussion? So I believe the only, do we need a motion to clarify the 17-member appointments? That's, I think, with our discussion, that one came up quite a bit. I think we're in agreement that 6 members from the council, the rest from the mayor, an ordinance, and of course it's ratified by the body, and the process moving forward for this first time will be that council the mayor will appoint after the council appoints, to ensure that we have all the folks from the different categories and different communities. Is that? Councilmember Tuttle.
I'm just asking a clarifying question because I want to make sure I heard it right and I'm getting it right. There was a recommendation that each council member nominate 2, but now I heard 1. So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And so I was supportive of 2, but I can, I'll be supportive, but just curious because I'm hearing different things. Thank you.
I believe the conversation started with 1 diverted into what about 2 members, and then because I believe Councilmember Fry brought up the issues with fulfilling all the different groups, how it would, we likely could run into some problems if we didn't have flexibility for the at-large appointees to fit in the different requirements of the ordinance. Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Councilmember Tuttle, I did make that recommendation. I like it, but the process outlined, I think, by Councilmember Fry with the mayor and city manager is fine to me. The only change I would like to make, though, is that we all make 1 appointment, including the mayor, so that would be 7. Yeah. Okay. And then we just have 10 that the mayor and city manager would have to go through, rather than just us, and then you just sit back and watch.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion that we change 6 to 6 from council members, 1 from the mayor, and that the remaining 10 members will be appointed after the initial appointments. Should we?
Well, it's up to 10, the way it's read.
Up to 10, okay. The future 10 will be appointed by the mayor and ratified by the city council.
I realize it's just a minor point, but going along with what Councilmember Fry said, it's up to 10.
Okay,
Because
so up to 10.
The maximum is established at 17 is not a guaranteed 17 members.
Okay, so I'll make sure that that's in the motion. So do I have to restate the motion, or we got it? We're good? All right, so is there a second to the clarification language? Vice Mayor Claycomb is on to speak to the motion.
Question before, yes. So the other technical things I talked about, like the conflict of interest definition, the taking out that accusations and findings against citizens, that the ex officio secretary will, those are just technical changes, or do those
What
need
I
to be
wanted
in the
to
motion?
do was go through all of those to make sure there's an understanding, everybody understands when you vote on this, and that when there's a second reading, those will have been incorporated into that ordinance. Is that all right, Jen?
Okay,
Yes,
I'd like me to go back
that's
through.
not what we're doing. We are, any changes to the ordinance will require a motion and a vote. So this isn't a workshop, so I think that to stay in alignment with our ordinance, the first one that you mentioned is the motion I'm trying to address, and then we can motion for the other stuff. You wanted to make a motion for those changes. So to link conflict of interest to the definition of a future conflict of interest, that would be its own motion after this motion.
So we're gonna vote on the ordinance?
I'd recommend that all changes be made in one motion.
Well, not all changes. So first of all, the member section is a different motion and a different amendment than the section on defining conflict of interest. I want people to be able to vote for the member clarification language if they don't agree with the conflict of interest language. So when we are debating an ordinance and discussing amendments to that ordinance, it's important that we make a difference between what is questions, what is brainstorming, what is discussion, and then what is the will of the body on change. And my understanding, the only way to do that is to have an actual motion. And the motion is on the floor, and discussion for this motion, which is something I think we all agree on, should be about this motion. Then once the motion's off the floor, whether it fails or moves forward, we can have open discussion, or hopefully motions to make the other changes. And I want to make sure this is done properly, so that's why I'm doing it this way. So my motion was to have 6 from the council, 1 from the mayor, and then up to 10 other at-large members appointed by the mayor and ratified from the council. And that was my motion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion or the seconding? Seeing none, clerk will open the roll for the amendment. The result of 5 yeas, 6 yeas, 1 absent, the motion does pass. So that issue about members is now off. The next was on the list, if we went in order, was the definition of conflict of interest. So if Vice Mayor would like to, who is now on the floor, would like to make a motion.
So do I have to make each one of these by themselves?
Yes.
All right.
If you want separate votes on each one, if you believe that there can be a discussion and vote on them collectively, that could be in one motion.
You can make a motion where you amend 2 sections at once.
Okay, so I would like to move that we define conflict of interest by stating as defined in the bylaws.
Are those bylaws that the committee itself or the council itself creates, or the bylaws that are established in our ordinance?
The bylaws that are referred to in this ordinance.
So they're, okay, so the ones that the council itself creates its own bylaws.
Yep.
So that the conflict of interest will be, definition will be defined by the bylaws in which the council creates, not utilizing, although not excluding, the same definition of conflict of interest is found in other areas of our ordinance.
I think she means in bylaws, the yet to be drafted bylaws.
Okay, I just want to clarify.
And by the board, not by the council.
Of course.
By this board.
Yep.
Okay, so that's my first motion.
Second. So to clarify, the motion has been made and seconded is to add conflict of interest as defined by the board itself and the bylaws in which they create. Clerk will open the roll, members cast votes. The result of 6 yeas to 1 absent, the motion does pass. Conflict or the Claycoma motion passes. You retain the floor, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, my next motion will be to, it's section 6, item 3B, that the members need to participate in COMA and CORA training provided by the city before they can participate in voting, or however we word it. You understand what I'm saying? Okay.
And does that, just for reference, does that correlate with the COMA training for DAB boards?
Yeah.
Could we utilize some of the similar language there and keep it, consistent? So I'm going to second your motion, so I just want to clarify. So your motion is to add similar language for the COMA training that is utilized in DAB boards to keep it consistent. I will second that.
Yes.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? See none. With that, members cast a vote. The result of 6 yeas to 1 absent, the motion does pass. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And I would like to move that section 7.7, referencing accusations and findings against citizens, be deleted.
So I'd ask staff, can you read that section to us so we know exactly what section it is?
The City Council shall reserve the right to review all decisions of subsidiary boards and commissions except as may otherwise be provided by law, in order that aggrieved citizens may have the right of appeal to an elected body from the decision of an appointive body of the city.
And the intent is to limit the committee so the committee can't hear, I guess, cases that might be brought against other citizens or entities. I believe from discussion that was the intent, but deleting this section would only make it so if there was grievances against citizens or other entities, they wouldn't come in front of the council. Is that accurate?
The way I read it is this board is not drafted to entertain complaints or investigative processes or grievances. This language is perhaps just a carryover from another document that was provided to me. So I don't believe, I believe the deletion of it is appropriate based on the drafting of the authority of this board as it's written.
Does anybody have the institutional knowledge to tell us that the former non-discriminatory ordinance that was repealed before I think any of us were elected, did that have language in it that allowed for people to come to the board and share their experiences and the board to make resolutions or act on it? Does anybody know off the top of your head?
I wasn't here, but what I know of, there did exist a commission. I believe it was a civil rights commission, if that's what's being suggested. And I believe it was built and designed for the process for complaints to be made and investigated through that commission. I don't know any more details than that.
Okay.
Yeah, Mayor, this opens up a whole different body of work, so to speak, for this group. Again, not being here at the time, but it's my understanding that the Civil Rights Commission was disbanded because there was an enforcement mechanism at the state level and a way to investigate complaints. And so I believe that the council elected to defer to the state Human Rights Board or Commission to investigate complaints. And I think there was a feeling they were better equipped to deal with those issues.
So did the Human Rights Board at the state level, do we know of any off the top of our head times in which they investigated a complaint here in Wichita?
The Human Rights Commission routinely entertains complaints from the city, with the people within the city from across the state. So it's a statewide commission and it has jurisdiction everywhere, so yes.
Okay. Well, the Civil Rights Commission, if that's something we want to keep separate, it might be something that this board can actually look towards. I support Civil Rights Commission, so I'm not sure because if leaving this language in might actually help bring precedence for a Civil Rights Commission, so I'm still ponder this. Councilmember Tuttle.
So could this council, it wouldn't have the authority to develop a civil rights commission without coming before council, correct? I mean, because that's kind of seems a little, maybe I'm incorrect, but far out of their scope.
This ordinance is drafted to be an advisory board similar to other advisory boards of the city council.
So they couldn't do that
That's
in
correct.
isolation. Okay, thank you.
That's not entirely correct. An advisory board can advise the council to pass an ordinance. An advisory board can actually say, hey, this is a ordinance or this is the policy that other cities are doing, and we advise you to look into this. I'm sorry, Vice Mayor just said that's not her question. Can you clarify the question?
Yeah.
No, and I'm sorry, I was just asking a clarifying question, but this, just like our district advisory boards or park board or any other board, except the library board's a little bit different, but it's an advisory board, and so this group could not create a civil rights commission. They could make the recommendation to council, but then it would have to come to council for approval.
Right.
Yeah.
No, they would have to come. Yeah. So I interpret your question as if it would be outside the scope, I think was the terminology of this board, to create policy on their own. And
yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. They can't create policy on their own, correct? They can make recommendations to us for policy, but they can't make policy on their own. Jennifer, am I correct?
If you look at the drafted mission or purposes on in section 4, This draft sets forth the specific duties of the advisory board.
Yep, so make recommendations, not policy. Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Right, but I do want to clarify that their recommendations might be for policy to happen. So that was my clarification. So if that's what, and apparently that wasn't a question asked, but I want to make that clear. This isn't a board that we just go to when we have a question. This is an active board who will be creating policy to further our community and the issues of diversity, civil rights, and inclusion. So I'm glad we have that cleared up.
Mayor, can I just follow up with that?
Sure.
Thank you. I just was trying to make the clarification that they can recommend a policy, but they don't pass a policy, it still comes to us. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood, including the board, when they're getting appointed, the distinction between that. So that's why I was just asking, just to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Excellent. I don't think we have do we have a board that can make policy without the policy being approved by the elected body?
I'll need help here, but I think the park board has the ability to establish regulations for the park system without council authority or approval.
Okay.
And I think the library board has some of the same authority.
Interesting.
And disposal of property with park board as well, too, right?
Yes, that's correct, the land that they control.
So they don't just enforce ordinance, they can actually create ordinance?
Not an ordinance, but they can create their own policies that are enforceable without council approval.
Interesting.
And it's a long history.
We'll talk about this. We'll talk about this later. Then, all right. Interesting. All right.
It's tied up in changes to home rule.
My brain's tingling. Okay, so divert the floor back to Vice Mayor Claycomb, who I believe made a motion, and we're still discussing the motion.
Yeah, so I made the motion to delete section 7, item 7, on the authority to make accusations or findings against citizens.
Second.
Would that not allow them to make a resolution if they wanted to make a resolution?
I don't believe an advisory board has authority to adopt a resolution. They can vote to make a recommendation to forward to city council.
A resolution is an expressed opinion of a body. This is a body. They can't pass a resolution of the council, but they could pass a resolution of their own and post it on like social media. I mean, this wouldn't hinder that.
So if I,
As drafted, the ordinance says make recommendations to city council.
Yeah, and the reason I seconded it, two reasons actually. One, the entire discussion from this summer really focused around city policy, city practices, and this board being a public board and open to the public would have an opportunity to talk about that and then recommend back to the council, because we get all the minutes from all of our advisory boards in our packets. What we should do, and they'd be able to present to us as well. I think item 7, which I think is a good catch, opens them up to trying to hear other outside complaints, and that wasn't the focus of the majority of the individuals on this. But it doesn't say that they can't then say, hey, look, we're also hearing stuff from the community. City council, you should consider creating or recreating a civil rights commission that does have that ability. So I don't think this hurts the intent of this body. And it also kicks to them just more work, like with the bylaws they'll come up with. If they want to see that happen, they can recommend it to us.
Okay, and that's helpful, and without probably being support, I just wanted to ensure that if the recommendation for a policy or recommendation for usage of resources for this or that triggered because of the actions of an organization or an entity within our community, that they would still be able to discuss the causation for their recommendation, and that this wouldn't, by deleting this, wouldn't allow them to I guess, utilize an example.
No, I don't believe so, because even at DAB, we invite people up to speak to issues or hear from the community, and they still would have that ability.
I might be overthinking it. I mean, if you're the second on this, Councilmember Johnson, then I'm going to support it. So is there any more discussion on this item, or excuse me, on this motion? If there's not, clerk will open the roll. Members cast a vote. I ask members to refrain from voting until they hear all discussion. With a result of 6 yeas to 1 absent, the second Claycomb amendment does pass. Or third Claycomb amendment, I believe.
You ready for my next
Let's
one?
do it.
The next one is that the ex officio secretary will be responsible for recording, preparing, and maintaining minutes with the oversight of the board secretary.
That was the
Can
whole.
you speak to the motion?
Yes, so again, most of the boards that I serve on, or actually all of the boards that I serve on, have a staff member that records, prepares, and maintains minutes with the oversight from a board member. I think that puts, so I think that the ex officio secretary should be the one that records, prepares, and maintains those with the oversight from the board, because it is a lot to ask of a volunteer member on a volunteer board.
So, and the extra oversight and professional help from a secretary would probably help if a large number of the board wasn't left in. So this would probably be a big help with that. So
That too.
My only question is to the manager. We can't adapt that exact language because we are utilizing Wichita State's PPMC, and they're technically not employees, but such language, it will be okay for the first 2 years. I'm sure we can make it work, but I don't want to.
I believe that our program of work identifies that task as their responsibility.
Okay, so we're good. Excellent. So with that, I'll second that motion. Is there discussion on the motion? See no discussion.
Was there a second?
Yes, I second it.
Oh, I'm sorry, you said.
Madam Parliamentarian. Clerk will open a roll. Members cast vote. Result of 6 yeas to 1 absent. The amendment does pass. Madam Vice Mayor.
Okay, this one I have a question on for legal. I asked this earlier. This is about the bylaws being reviewed. I think just out of the, I don't think that needs to be in the ordinance. I think legal just does that as part of boards, right?
That could be part of our routine support for the board.
Okay, all right. And then my last one will be, and I may need some help from staff on this one. This would be to allow the board to create their own staggered terms. So however the police, the Citizen Review Board did that.
So maybe some language about, and I'm just throwing this out there, because we talked about the proposed motion. A additional line to the language about terms, one could add that through the creation of bylaws by the council, the decision to have staggered terms is up to them, or something along those lines, right? Like, so they can't, we don't want folks to be able to change the 2-year term to like a 10-year term, but with staggering, like what would be the cleanest way to do that?
I believe the Citizens Review Board, the terms go up to, I think, 3 years. They drew names or drew straws in effect to randomly assign themselves terms of 1, 2, or 3 years at the board meeting. So they had some, I think, 3-year terms to work with. If you want to do something similar, it would be someone would randomly get a 1-year term to start and a 2-year term to start. That's the closest comparison.
I don't think that's the motion. The motion was to add language that would allow the board, through their own bylaws, to create methods to have staggered terms.
Yeah, for this first, for the creation of the board, that we allow them to create their own staggered terms. I don't care how they do it. I mean, they can come up with their own method. So I don't know I don't know is that in the, would you put that in the ordinance? And then, before we say, and then after that, all terms are two-year terms?
My thought with that is utilizing the example that law just provided us. One of the problems is if it's random, the membership at that point might not correlate with the requirements of the members within the ordinance. If it's random,
Then wouldn't you just backfill with, you would just then appoint people from that, like anyone that leaves the term, anyone that leaves the office?
So the motion is to ask that the current board create a way to have staggered terms.
Yes, that is my motion.
Just for the first layer of appointments, and the fear is the scenario in which everyone would leave at once, the entire board will be replaced at once, and there wouldn't be a handoff of I guess, knowledge of what the last. I still have concerns with this. I think that the secretary, professionalizing the role of the secretary, and also my experience with the unlikeliness that everyone will vacate at once, makes me less supportive of this. So this motion, we need a second by someone else. But to further speak to the motion, Vice Mayor Clayco.
Well, Mayor, having served on many advisory boards before I joined City Council, I can tell you that particularly on a DAB board or Park Board, which I spent 8 years on, it would have been devastating, sorry for that dramatic word, but I think to have had the entire board have to leave all at the same time. So it's not just the organizational memory, it is processes and procedures that help. For example, in DAB, zoning cases get through, or on Park Board, to understand what happens in the park department. And so I could see, this is a really important board that I think has to have some carryover after 4 years. I just think if they don't, it will be very difficult, and we'll be recreating the wheel after 4 years again with a new board. And again, from my past experience, not a lot of people drop off boards they don't usually serve one term and then don't serve their second term. That may happen on this particular board, but again, with my experience, I've not seen that on the advisory boards that I've served on.
So and my couple of things, I guess, if I would argue my position, these aren't 4-year terms, they're 2-year terms. So if the fear is having the same board serve a maximum of 2 terms, same board members serve a maximum of 2 terms consecutively, that's also our fault, because we didn't infuse new folks onto it. And then also, I understand your experience with boards and how it would be devastating if everyone left a board and restarted a board all at once. But you also use the word would, which makes me wonder if it's common. If for a board to completely, all membership leave at once, because as was stated in my experience, it's not as common for everyone just to leave at once. So if you can, I guess, tell me if that is common with your experience serving on boards, then maybe I'll change my mind.
We have staggered terms on the other boards, so you might only have 2 people come up for review, and I understand this is two-year terms. So I think I've explained. I think others that have served on boards understand what I'm talking about. So.
Well, if that's the case, just to get back to your original statement, because I'm someone who also serves on boards, and I have a problem solving problems unless they are actually problems. So what I would like to know, particularly when it comes to policy, a lot of times less is more. So if we're trying to put in parameters for this very specific board that is going to have some people, I guess, try to make it more staggered. And I guess another way we could do it is if we're all going up to 17 people, we could this year appoint the 7 people and then move on to appoint the rest next year. That's also a way to do it. I'm open to it. I just I don't want any unintended consequences if there really is an experience of an active board all leaving at the exact same time, which each member has been appointed twice, which means there was oversight. I'm just worried about overcomplicating it, but I'll defer the floor. We got a couple people on here, so council member, like I said, we are just talking about this motion as it is, so your comments have to be germane to this motion, which hasn't had a second yet. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. I just want to clarify with Vice Mayor if I can. So your motion was basically to empower the council to be able to figure out their terms for themselves, right?
Yeah, for the advisory board.
So we're just kind of giving them the power to be able to figure out how to fix this problem for themselves.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But it's also now becoming on us to identify it to them as a problem. And I'm not sure if I have evidence that it's a problem yet. That's one of my concerns. Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. First, I want to second the motion. And then two, just a couple of names I could think of. If I were to appoint, because there's no district restrictions, so Joseph Shepard served on my DAB, he moved to District 3, he had to step down. That's not one of the qualifications for this. You just have to live in Wichita. I know for a fact Joseph would want to serve 2 terms, and just looking at experience and passion, if I were to say, great first term, now you're done, let me pick somebody else, then, there might be some work that he wanted to do, or, if I picked a lady who wanted to continue on, they'll probably stay the 2 terms. And this isn't the issue that, because I think you're looking at it as this is kind of a problem we're just talking about a little bit theoretically. And to that, yes, but this is a very significant board. So again, I think everybody's going to want to serve 2 terms. And in this work, especially in the civil rights and inclusion area, I think members who get appointed, who we just say thank you after the first term, and we just appoint someone else, will feel some type of disregard for their time and efforts in this board. So this empowering them to think about that themselves, so we're not just telling them, hey, one of our appointments is this, one of our appointments is that. It allows them an opportunity to discuss if that happens, because I think a majority of them, if not all, are going to stay on or try to ask the council member to reappoint them. So I think allowing them to have that discussion, we'll get the minutes, we'll know how that's going, is probably the best choice.
So my concern is they are going to be allowed to have that discussion if this amendment passes or not. I don't want to force this discussion on them. And given the example you bring up about Mr. Shepard, also it kind of shows that people are well-meaning and want to stay on, but then life happens and they wind up moving. Let's say in Mr. Shepard's case, he wanted to serve 2 terms, he's not. So someone is put on there on your DAB board in this example, and thus it naturally staggers. So I mean, that was my, I don't want, like I said, I don't want to force them to come up with a staggered plan for this one year, or this one service of term. I think we got bigger issues for them to focus on, and I think we could do this by appointing some of the board members this year and then some next year, and achieve the same thing without putting a burden on them to create a one-time staggering situation that might disenfranchise some of the members on that, where you guys are just going to do 1 year. Or, I'm just worried about opening up another can of worms. That's I agree it should be staggered. I also agree that a lot of times these are naturally staggered. I've never seen a board not, and no one has been able to tell me an example of one that hasn't. And so I worry about too much, I guess, too much bureaucracy with this. But Vice Mayor Claycomb is back on the board. Your motion has been seconded, so we'll have a vote on this.
Mayor, I would entertain, I don't know how you do this, a substitute motion, if you would like, with your idea. I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that they're staggered. So.
Can you
So you're saying.
repeat my idea? Because it's not often, by the way, I have a good idea that Vice Mayor Claycomb is interested in supporting on this, but repeat it for a couple of reasons.
That all 17 aren't appointed the first year, that we hold back some number and appoint those in the second year. If you think that's a better way to do it, you and Councilmember Johnson co-chaired this committee. If you think that's a better way to do it, I'd be fine. I just want to make sure that they're staggered.
It's staggering.
Yeah.
Councilmember Johnson would have to still support his seconding, or retract his second, or support the amendment to her motion.
Yeah, I subtract my initial second and I give a second to the new motion.
And I think we could actually, because that would also give us some flexibility where if members do drop off early, we could appoint members to still fulfill the diversity we're looking for. So that's actually, that might work better. I support that. I think that motion would get us where we need to be with, I think, less side policy problems. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. So what I hear now is that instead of empowering the group to do it, we're going to appoint some now and then some next year, so they'll be staggered. So I don't know this. How many people are on the council now? Are we starting with 0, or are we at ground 0? Okay, so the first year then the council won't be 17 people with this way.
The advisory board.
Right, the advisory board, yes, okay. I mean, not this council, but yeah, the Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights Council won't be 17. Just to clarify then, will the 7 appointees be in the first year? I mean, just kind of want to think ahead so that when we walk out the door, everybody knows and is on the same page that, the first, how many will be from this body, and the mayor gets the 1 or 2, or if I do math right, and then next year, so just want to clarify so we all know what we're voting for and what we all do after this.
No, that's a good clarification. I think that, the priority, particularly for the initial board, will be to ensure that every council member gets their nominee on, and then the same process will be utilized with the at-large appointments will be done in a manner to ensure that all the levels of diversity are met. And then once that's the case, we will hold off the next round of appointments for at least a year, and then we would have staggering. Vice Mayor Claycomb.
So, Mayor, would you entertain, in addition to your substitute motion, that we have 7 appointed by mayor and city council and 4 the first year? So we have a board of 11 the first year?
I believe that would be the way to proceed, so long as all 11 represented the thorough diversity as intended by the. Yes, of course, that'd be my only.
Thank you.
Yeah, if we needed. I think that's a good clarification. Again, this is your motion, so you can close any motion, or we can just vote.
I believe it was suggested that there be a substitute motion by the mayor, because it's a substitute motion for vice mayor's previous motion. So could it be a mayor's substitute motion?
It could be. I thought that it was the vice mayor is making a second substitute motion based off my excellent idea, as I think she put it. No, was making a substitute motion based off the debate or the discussion. But if it's cleaner that way, then I can make the motion. If that's how it's been recorded, we'll.
Could you restate the motion then, please?
Okay, so I make the or a motion has been made to, in attempts to stagger membership of this board, that all council members in the first year will have their appointees, and the mayor will have his appointees, and then the remaining appointees will be made at large, not to exceed 11 total members of the first year. The remaining members will be selected
Following year.
with what?
The following year.
Say the following year, or at no time sooner than the following year.
Yeah. And
Is
then
there
can
a
I second that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll
and-
second that.
That was my question.
We're going to scratch Johnson off the seconding list. I actually like doing this, so I apologize at this. I actually like making these things and making them official, making them good. And in the debate, to be honest, if we didn't have this discussion, I think this is a stronger way to go. So I appreciate it. I think Vice Mayor has about 7 other ones she would like to offer. So.
Nope, that's it.
Oh,
I'm
excellent.
finished.
Excellent.
But we have to vote on this.
We do, yeah. So is there any other discussion on the ordinance as amended? So, I'll make a motion to pass the ordinance out as amended.
If I may, we haven't voted on the substitute motion.
Oh, you're
Yeah, we're
right.
still waiting.
We're still
Somebody hasn't.
Somebody hasn't, as I click
Nope,
mine.
now everybody has.
You got 6. You've got 6 there.
We do have 6. I think we're missing.
Thumbs up.
Oh, you're right. We do have 6. Thank you, Councilmember Clendenin. I apologize. I got distracted for a second. I got a compliment today from the bench and it just threw me off. With the result of 6 yeas to 0 nays to 1 absent, the motion to amend passes. We are now back on the original, or excuse me, we're now back on the ordinance as amended. Further discussion on the ordinance. And I will actually defer the chair to Councilmember Johnson for a motion on the ordinance, in which I'll follow up with a second.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move that the City Council adopt the amended ordinance and approve the agreement.
Can I ask a question? Should that be your motion be to place the amended ordinance on first reading?
Oh, I read the wrong section, I'm sorry. And approve the first, or put the ordinance on first reading. I was looking at the top line, I'm sorry.
Excellent. And I will second it and just speak to the seconding just by thanking those members who served on the initial advisory council on diversity, inclusion, and civil rights. And I will just name off these. We had 27 members, including the co-chair, Councilmember Johnson, who really stepped up during June 2020 to ensure that we had we had the ball rolling on this important project. I see staff shaking heads. Am I missing something? Can we?
Just wanted to confirm and believe that it was included in the motion that Councilmember Johnson moved that the amended ordinance be placed on first reading and that the agreement with Wichita State PPMC be approved.
Yes. I said that out of order, but yes.
I thought you did. Thank you, sir.
And I still second. So with that, I just want to thank the following people who really stepped up. This was an initiative that we weren't sure where what the outcome was going to be, what the product was going to be, but we knew there was a need. We knew there was a need for folks in the community from all backgrounds, all walks of life, to have a direct input to the policy branch of our government and to the electeds. And when we got together, we were able to create, through dialogue, what this will be a permanent board to take on these issues. So thank you to Devontae Harris, to Pastor Pam Mason, to Reverend Kevin Graham, to Alicia Sanchez, to Karen Casey, to Lawanda DeSager, to Tarkim Mazi, to Emily this one's German, to Emily Schlinker, to Marquita Atkins, to Abby Boatman, to Sean Gates, to Chad Rico, to JJ James, to Faith Martin, to Nog Vong, to Brandon Trotter, to Dalton Glasscock, to Willie Scott Jr., to Azim Mahdi, to Abdul Arif, to Kame Mason, to Rabbi Michael Davis, to Dr. Reverend Patricia Havis, to Reverend Robert Johnson, to Kinsey Borland. Thank you all for your work in this, making it possible, and we hope that you apply to be on this board as it moves forward. So with that, clerk will open the roll. And then here's will cast your vote. We have 6 yeas to 1 absent, which means the motion does pass. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Adoption of the National Electrical Code 2020 edition.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Here today, we're here to present the adoption of the 2020 National Electrical Code with amendments. Just a little background, on December the 2nd, we presented this in public hearing to the BOCC, and there was no opposition, and it was approved. So this adoption will update our national electric, forward. There you go. This adoption will update our national electrical code and amendments, as well as our Article 4 of the Unified Building and Trade Code. It ties in very nicely with our National Fire Protection Association, specifically the NFPA 70. It also is associated with other national standards, such as our International Code Council, which are the codes that we use today. Our trade codes are revised every 3 years to remain current with our changing industry standards and practices. And it's to note the Electrical Board, or the Board of Electrical Appeals, as well as our MABCD staff, has really worked hard to review this 2020 edition of the NEC. Over the last 12 months, actually began September 2019. And it's kind of been difficult because of this pandemic. It's been a slow process, but we are glad to present it to you today. So the electrical code coordinates and works with various other international codes that we use in our building and construction field. The mechanical, fuel gas code, and fire code are some of these. The last adoption of this code, or the latest adoption, is in September 2017. It's the 2017 NEC with 27 amendments. And now we have the 2020 NEC with 34 amendments. And in those 4, they're slated for future adoption or exclusion. And we'll discuss those a little bit later. This will allow us to really use the industry's expertise, and we'll be able to evaluate during this code cycle the effectiveness of these 4 and whether or not we want to adopt them and bring them into the code in the future. We did have 12 items that were excluded previously in the code, and now they've been reduced to 7. And as was mentioned, the BOC adopted this December 2nd of this year. Of course, our use of the NEC impacts not only the city of Wichita, but Sedgwick County, 18 smaller cities that we contract with, and 2 adjacent counties. And we work with the contractors and the industry in general, and they all support our staff as we work hard to use the NEC effectively throughout the year. There is no safety or management issues, and the amendments are relatively minimal in this cycle. So as we go to the adoption process, just in review, the Board of Electrical Appeals, as well as the MABCD, has worked hard to go over this adoption process. We've had input and buy-in from industry associations such as the National Electrical Contractors Association, Independent Electrical Contractors. We've had Wichita Electrical Joint Apprenticeship and Training Center provide information and input. And of course, we have the city and the county fire that have assisted as well. We've also met with the Wichita Area Builders Association, and they've given us their full support in this endeavor. Now, we have 2 substantial changes, and we'll be able to highlight these in the next coming slides. For example, one of the changes is that all 250-volt outlets in a dwelling is to be GFCI protected, so the cord and plug protected appliances like your range or your dryer. Since we don't have a lot of information with regards to this, we're giving out the option for manufacturers and electrical contractors to, throughout this 3-year period, they have the option of either using this or not. But it'll provide us with information to help us to get a further, more of an overall view of this so that we can determine whether or not, as it mentions there, future enforcement date of January, 1 of 2024, where we're going to allow manufacturers time to verify functionality of appliances on GFCIs for this. Now, that's on the inside of the dwelling. On the next slide, we have the outside or the outdoor outlets for GFCI protection. And this too is really just all, as it mentions there, all 250-volt outdoor outlets, including AC disconnects to the GFCI protection. And so this too, we want to be tested over the next 3 years so that we can, it's kind of like a beta test, we want to make sure that they're safe and they function correctly, and then we can agree to enforce on the January 1, 2024 date of the 2023 code. Now here we have something that we're going to remove. The new code requires that dwelling units have surge protection. And so in NEC Article 230.67, the Board of Appeals wants to remove or recommend the removal of it being required to being permitted. And the reason why they want to do that is because individuals want to protect their appliances or their electronics, then we feel that that's a good idea, but we didn't feel like we could make it be required because we're not trying to protect the person, we're trying to just protect the electronics. And of course, this is an added cost to the industry, so we feel like we can remove that verbiage and change it. Now on our next one, we have a definite change and a requirement that is in the code, and it's going to benefit our first responders because they're going to be able to shut off this electrical from the outside of the structure. So it's dwelling unit exterior emergency disconnect. Now in this it says, this change requires that all dwellings have a main disconnect outside of the structure for first responders. So right now, a lot of times if there's a fire or a flood or any major disaster, natural disaster, the first responders, such as the fire department, would go out, and if they can't disconnect it from the inside, then they have to wait for a utility contractor to come in and disconnect it. So there's time and safety involved with that. So one of the questions that was brought to the attention of the MABCD by the BOCC was, since this enclosure is on the outside of the structure, can anybody just get into it? Well, no, because the enclosure is required to be locked by the owner. So, and if there's a fire, then the fire department can actually come and cut the lock and be able to shut off the electrical for that structure. So now this is this slide here helps us to appreciate, even Evergreen is going to be requiring this as well. So this is for exterior emergency disconnect. And then our final slide is a dwelling unit requiring another exterior disconnect for any alternate energy. So sometimes structures will have generators installed to provide extra electrical for the structure. And this NEC Article Point 18 says, this change requires that all dwellings have an emergency disconnect outside of the structure for first responders when generators are installed. So this also would provide protection for our first responders. Well, that concludes the summary of our presentation. It's our recommendation that the City Council place on the first reading the ordinance to amend Article 4, Section A, Article 4, Section 1, and Article 4, Section 2 of the Wichita-Sedgwick County Unified Building and Trade Code, and authorize the necessary signatures. And I'll stand for questions.
Councilmember Fry.
Thank you. If you could jump back to slide 10 as it relates to the emergency disconnects. So you said only emergency responders would have the ability to unlock or to disconnect the lock, but wouldn't anybody else have that same ability? I mean, if it's just
It's going to
cutting
be
a
locked
lock,
by the owner. So
if it's
that
just
lock-
cutting a lock, what's to stop somebody else from just coming by and cutting the lock?
Well, that's a good question. I do have my electrical chief on board to answer any of these questions. So
I mean, if somebody wanted to be malicious or vindictive,
that's true.
could do that and, you know, damage refrigerator contents, life support, whatever, right? It's
Right.
very dark, but what's to stop someone from anyone cutting that lock?
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of City Council. You are correct, Council Member, that it doesn't stop anybody from accessing that disconnect. It is the owner's property. They will be able to place a lock on that enclosure to protect someone from disconnecting it. But currently, right now, we have unfused conductors entering the structure, and this will not only provide safety for our first responders, but it'll also provide overcurrent protection for those unfused conductors that enter the structure. So it's kind of a twofold protection, but you are correct. So the answer to your question is, it does not stop anybody from coming and being malicious and accessing that equipment.
Maybe this is a question for legal, would there be another overriding violation that could protect a homeowner from that? A criminal charge or something?
I mean, certainly criminal damage to property comes to mind, that already exists. I mean, that could be charged criminally for anything like that.
And would that be able to hold up?
Oh, I believe so.
Okay. That's just a concern that obviously I mean, I totally understand the need and why we're doing it, but I just, you know, someone who's vindictive or payback or whatever could really cause some serious damage. And making sure that that homeowner has protection for that. I want to make sure we're covering that. Is this exist somewhere else, or is this new across the country?
That was going to be my question. And if so, just to add on to the question, have we seen, or do you know if we've seen any type of insurance rates go up because in other areas that might have this cause problems? Go ahead.
That's a good question. I see if Mr. Nordick is still available to answer that, our chief inspector here.
Yeah, to answer your question, we don't have any documented information regarding that. I will tell you that even though this is new to the code, to the 2020 NEC, a lot of jurisdictions around the country have their main disconnects directly adjacent to their meter enclosures outside. So it's not something that's new to the industry or new to the country. It is something that would be new to the city of Wichita and Sedgwick County, as again, I've stated that we've always allowed the unfused conductors to enter the structure up to 15 feet of length. So this will actually protect those conductors as they enter the structure.
Council,
I just hope we don't have to come back and address consequences because of this later. So
I would think, Mayor, members of the council, I would think this is similar to the Knox boxes that are used by fire department with apartments. And, you know, I don't know that we typically have people breaking into the Knox box to obtain keys. I understand what you're saying, but we do, we've been using Knox boxes for a long time.
Yeah, but typically there's not potential risk to damage of property within inside the home. Here, I mean, you could shut down refrigeration that have, storage of meat, etc. I mean, you could end up losing a lot of valuable contents and so forth.
No, I agree. Sometimes individuals even have, when it comes to safety precautions with their systems around their house, and they could get those cut off too as well. So, I mean, we've tried to look at the whole situation, circumstances surrounding this, and we feel like with using this lock, we could look at the type of lock that could be used to give it more protection, but it's really going to benefit the fire department and first responders when it comes to the protection.
Again, I'm envisioning a worst case scenario, but it's just something that I think we need to consider. So, I'm fine with the rest of it, that was a concern.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I share Councilmember Fry's concern. I can think of a lot of different ways this could be used in damaging ways. I mean, even just looking at security and alarm systems, if you cut the main power, I mean, at that point, all your contents are vulnerable. And I don't know if there's a better way or a more difficult way to have that. I know we want ease to help our first responders, but if there's, I don't know, a way to put it like inside somebody's front door or, once you have to go in the house. I don't know. I just think that that's a concern of mine as well. My other concern was, I think you said section 230.67, forget what slide that was, about the surge protection. And you are saying it's a recommendation to permit it but not require it. And my question is, would this not benefit the individual to have the surge protection already in the event that, lightning strikes or something, and we're just making this an option?
You're correct. It does provide that protection in the actual panel itself. A lot of people use now, you have those surge strips that they have to protect. And as reviewing this with the Board of Electrical Appeals and with the industry, they felt that it would be the option of the owner to be able to use this. So it's permitted, but it's not required. And so we want them to have that option, but we wouldn't want to make that requirement because it would be another added cost to the industry and to the homeowner.
Do you know about how much those cost?
I don't, sir. I can find that information out and get it to you.
I'd be curious, and I'll only say that again, I try to think about just the benefit of the individual, and if there's an opportunity that requires some surge protection, whether they know how to do that or not on their own, then it just makes their dwelling better because they have that protection already. It's something that they can worry less about, and making it an option, on the business side, you always want to do things to cut your costs, but for me, it's at what cost? I mean, if we can make a house safer with surge protection, why not do it? And if the cost of this is not extreme, if it's, $5,000 or $10,000 a house, I get it. But, if it's $100 or $200, it's worth it. Just my thought.
I'll definitely get that information for you, sir.
Further discussion on the item? All right, I'll just add that I want to thank the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, who I asked to review this policy as well. They have reported back that they are in support of these changes. And since they represent a large percentage of the industry, I thought that was important to point out. If there's no further discussion, then I will make the motion to accept staff's recommended action to place on first reading the ordinance to amend Article 4, Section A, Article 4, Section 1, and Article 4, Section 2 of the Wichita-Centre County Unified Building and Trades Code, UBTC, and authorize the necessary signatures. Councilmember Johnson speaking to the motion.
I just wanted to say why I will not be supportive today, and I still have major concerns about that disconnect button. And to Councilmember Fry's point, whether I'm on council or not in a few years, I just feel like that discussion is going to come back up. And it'll be good for our first responders, but I would just hate to see a rash of power being cut off in places and things being stolen or property like food and stuff being wasted. It's just a concern. And we all were kids at one point. I know as a kid, if there was a big red button I'm not supposed to push, I'm probably going to push it. And, you know, I just hate to see it. So today I won't be supportive for that reason.
Since there hasn't been a seconded yet in this motion, I'm wondering, would there be any harm in pushing this to a future meeting to further vet those concerns? Or is there any appetite for that where someone would move to bring us up maybe a month from now or so? Because I'd be supportive of that. I don't know if there's any, if we need this code changed by the end of the year, if there's unintended consequences or anything. So staff, do we know if we held this off to try to address those concerns more, is there a...
We can review this again and bring it back to the council. That's not an issue. We just want to mention Evergy is moving forward with requiring this. So they are a part of our industry that we're trying to support.
But this wouldn't prevent them from doing it.
No.
They can move forward even if we took an extra week or two on this. Councilmember Fry, what are your thoughts?
I'm fine with supporting the motion today, but knowing that the concerns that Councilmember Johnson and I both have, if staff could maybe put some recommendations for us to review and address that after the first of the year, because I don't know that we have another full meeting before this year is over. So again, on the whole, I agree with the item, but just that concern on that one piece, I think if staff can look at it and review some possible ways that we could protect citizens, or maybe it's an increased criminal fine if something was, I don't know, but give us some recommendations that we could review as it relates to that item. I think that would work.
So we're pushing it forward. I would also ask staff as well, if we do move forward with this, and my motion is seconded, then if we could also perhaps talk to our law enforcement department and see if other communities that adapt these, if there has been a link to utilizing these shutoffs and crime, and if so, if that's something that they're concerned about. I think that would be good to get some more information on that. So with that, I'll probably still maintain my motion if it is seconded and to push it out today. Vice Mayor Clayco.
I just have a question. Courtney, is that already exist on multifamily where that's outside the dwelling?
With the lockout?
Uh-huh.
No, I don't think so, no.
So it can go in
Let me
unfused
ask
into
Chris
the multi?
Nordick. He deals with commercial structures all the time. Chris?
Yes, yes, that is, most multifamily dwellings, apartment buildings have their meters and disconnects outside. It's called a meter pack. It's got multiple meters in a single assembly. So they have their disconnect switches to each apartment out in a single enclosure. Some apartment buildings in the city of Wichita do not. They have that enclosure on the interior, but most of the large apartment complexes have that meter and disconnecting means on the outside.
Thank you. I'll second your motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion or further discussion? If there is none, clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. With a result of two nays with 4 yeas and 1 absent, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember appointments and comments.
Are there any appointments council members would like to make at this time? If not, we'll get into announcements. First, I just want to congratulate the 7th grade Wichita Cowboys for an outstanding athletic accomplishment for their second place victory in the American Football National Championships earlier this weekend. We have a certificate here that I hope to possibly hand out to maybe the coach. I got to call him and see if he can come in during our press conference this week, and I just want to take this moment to congratulate the young folks who went to Florida representing our city in a national championship level game. Even though they came up short in that game, they did bring home a pretty significant looking runner-up trophy that hopefully the coach can bring with him to the press conference so we can show it off here at City Hall. So that's my announcement. Are there any other announcements? All right, if there's no other announcements, I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded by the Vice Mayor. Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. We're the result of 6 yeas to 1 absent. The motion does pass. Thank you all. We are adjourned.